Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Officer Marcus Lester, badge number 7841, and I've been with the NYPD for 11 years now. What happened in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath City Hall still wakes me up at night, sweat-soaked and reaching for my service weapon. This occurred 3 years ago, but I remember every detail like it was yesterday. It was August 15th, a Tuesday night, unbearably humid even at 11:47 p.m. when the call came in. I was working out of the 32nd Precinct with my partner, Officer Gladys Morrison. Gladys had been on the force for 15 years and was one of the toughest cops I knew. Nothing rattled her, or so I thought. Chester, our dispatcher, came through the radio with an unusual request. Unit 32-7. We've got multiple 911 calls reporting screaming from the abandoned City Hall subway station area. Callers say it sounds like someone in distress, possibly trapped. Need immediate response. The City Hall station had been closed since 1945. It was one of those forgotten pieces of New York infrastructure that urban explorers sometimes tried to access illegally. The MTA kept it locked down tight, but every few months someone would break in to take photos or just explore. Copy that, Chester. En route, I responded. The drive through Manhattan was quick at that hour. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few late-night food trucks and the occasional taxi. When we arrived at the intersection Chester had specified, we found an MTA maintenance access point. A heavy metal door set into the sidewalk that was supposed to be locked and chained. The chain had been cut with bolt cutters. Fresh cuts, too. The exposed metal hadn't even begun to rust. Someone's definitely been here, Gladys said, examining the chain. Recently, we called it in, then descended the narrow metal stairs into the maintenance tunnel. The air immediately became thick and musty. That particular underground smell of rust, dampness, and decades of accumulated grime. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing a narrow corridor that led toward the old station. About 50 feet in, we heard it. A voice, definitely human, definitely in distress. It was muffled but urgent, echoing from somewhere deeper in the tunnel system. NYPD. Call out if you can hear us, Gladys shouted. The voice responded, but we couldn't make out the words. We quickened our pace, following the sound through a series of maintenance corridors. These weren't the pretty tiled sections you see in the vintage photos. This was all industrial, bare concrete and exposed pipes, with barely enough room for 2 people to walk side by side. We reached a junction where the maintenance tunnel connected to the actual abandoned station platform. The historic City Hall station was famous for its beautiful curved platform and skylights, but in our flashlight beams, it looked like something out of a nightmare. Decades of neglect had taken their toll. The once beautiful Guastavino tile arches were stained with water damage and mold. Debris littered the platform, old newspapers, bottles, the detritus of urban explorers and homeless individuals who'd managed to get in over the years. Help, please help me. The voice was clearer now, coming from the tracks. We climbed down carefully. The third rail was supposedly dead in this section, but you never take chances with that. Our lights swept across the track bed, and that's when we saw him. A young man, maybe 25, was pinned beneath a section of collapsed ceiling. A chunk of concrete the size of a refrigerator had fallen, trapping his legs. His face was pale, twisted in pain, and there was blood pooling beneath him. "Sir, we're NYPD. We're going to get you out," Gladys said, immediately moving to assess his injuries while I radioed for emergency medical services and a rescue team. "There are others," the young man gasped. "My friends. We came down here together, urban exploring, but something happened." "How many others?" I asked. "4. We were 5 total. They went deeper, toward the old City Hall loop, heard something, and went to check." He winced, gripping Gladys's hand. "That was 2 hours ago. Then the ceiling just came down." The City Hall loop was a section of track that allowed trains to turn around. It connected to a maze of service tunnels and abandoned stations. If his friends had gone that way, they could be anywhere in miles of tunnel. "Chester, we need backup for a search and rescue," I radioed. "We have 1 injured civilian trapped, 4 others missing in the tunnel system. We need multiple units and someone who knows these tunnels." Chester's response was concerning. "All available units are tied up with that situation in the Bronx. I can get you 2 units, but it'll be at least 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In tunnels where ceilings could collapse without warning, where someone could get lost and never be found, 20 minutes felt like hours." "I'll stay with him," Gladys said. "You take a quick look for the others. Just a visual check. Don't go far." I didn't like splitting up, but she was right. If those kids were injured somewhere nearby, every minute counted. I headed toward the loop tunnel, my flashlight beam dancing across the vandalized walls. The graffiti here was different from typical tagger work, older, stranger. Some of it looked like it had been scratched into the concrete rather than painted. The loop tunnel was partially flooded, about 6 inches of black water covering the tracks. My boots splashed through it as I called out, "NYPD! If anyone can hear me, call out." Nothing but echo. I went deeper, maybe 200 yards, when I found the first sign of them. A backpack, expensive looking, dropped in the middle of the tunnel. A few feet away, a smartphone, the screen cracked but still functioning. I picked it up and saw it was recording video. I stopped the recording and played back the last few minutes. The shaky footage showed 4 young people, laughing, exploring, their phone lights creating wild shadows. Then one of them, a girl with purple hair, stopped. "Did you hear that?" she asked in the video. They all went quiet. In the background of the video, very faintly, you could hear it. A rhythmic tapping, like metal on concrete. Tap, tap, tap. "It's probably just water dripping," one of the guys said in the video. But even through the phone speaker, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The video continued, showing them moving toward the sound. The tapping got louder. Then the girl with purple hair screamed, the phone fell, and the video showed nothing but darkness. But the audio continued, running feet, splashing water, more screams, and then nothing. I pocketed the phone as evidence and continued forward, now deeply concerned. These weren't seasoned urban explorers who knew the dangers. These were kids who'd gotten in over their heads. That's when I heard it myself, the tapping. The same rhythmic sound from the video. It was coming from ahead, from one of the service tunnels that branched off the main loop. I followed the sound, my hand on my weapon now. The service tunnel was narrower, older. The concrete here was crumbling in places, and I could see rebar exposed like broken bones. The tapping got louder. I rounded a corner and found them, 3 of the 4 missing kids. They were huddled together in an alcove, terrified but alive. One of them, a young man in a Columbia University sweatshirt, was holding a piece of rebar, tapping it against the wall, a signal for help. "Thank God," he breathed when he saw my uniform. "We got lost, and then Sarah. Sarah went to find help, but she didn't come back, and we heard... Heard what? I asked, doing a quick visual check of them for injuries. They seemed okay, just scared and cold from the water. Screaming, the girl with purple hair whispered. We heard Sarah screaming, but it sounded wrong, like it was coming from everywhere at once. I got them moving back toward the platform where Gladys was waiting. We were maybe halfway there when we heard it. A scream, high-pitched and terrified, echoing through the tunnels. But the kids were right. There was something wrong with how it sounded. It seemed to come from multiple directions, bouncing off the walls in ways that didn't make acoustic sense. "Sarah!" one of the kids shouted. "Stay together," I ordered, trying to pinpoint where the sound was actually coming from. Then my radio crackled. "Lester!" Gladys's voice was tense. "We've got a problem. Get back here now." We moved quickly through the flooded tunnel. When we reached the platform, I saw what had alarmed Gladys. The young man we'd found trapped. He was free. The massive chunk of concrete had been moved, pushed aside like it weighed nothing. But he was unconscious, and there was more blood than before. "I didn't move him," Gladys said. "I went to check the entrance for the EMTs, was gone maybe 2 minutes. When I came back, the concrete was moved, and he was like this." "Who moved it?" I asked, though even as I said it, I knew it didn't make sense. That piece of concrete would have required equipment or several strong people to move. "That's not all," Gladys said, shining her light on the wall behind where the concrete had been. There was an opening, not a doorway, but a rough hole that had been hidden by the fallen ceiling. Through it, we could see another tunnel, one that didn't appear on any of the MTA maps I'd studied. And there was something else. Written on the wall beside the hole, in what looked like fresh blood, were the words, "She's mine now." The EMTs arrived 15 minutes later, along with 2 backup units. The injured young man was stabilized and rushed to Bellevue Hospital. The 3 kids we'd found were brought up to street level, where they gave preliminary statements while wrapped in thermal blankets, still shaking from cold and fear. But Sarah was still missing. Lieutenant Patricia Hayes arrived to take command of the scene. She was a 20-year veteran who'd worked everything from homicide to organized crime. She took one look at the hole in the wall and the blood message, and immediately called for a full tactical response team. "This isn't some urban explorer who got lost," she said. "Someone else is down here." While we waited for the tactical team, I showed Hayes the phone video. She watched it twice, her expression growing more concerned each time. "The tapping," she said. "That's a hunting technique." Someone was luring them deeper into the tunnels. The tactical team arrived with a specialist from the MTA, an old-timer named Robert Hutchinson, who'd been mapping the abandoned sections of the subway for 30 years. He studied the hole in the wall with interest. "This connects to the old beach pneumatic tunnel," he said. "First subway tunnel ever built in New York, back in 1870. It was supposed to be sealed off completely, but there have been rumors for years about people living down there." "Living?" Hayes asked. Hutchinson nodded grimly. "The city has about 700 miles of subway tunnels. Maybe half of those are in active use, the rest? Abandoned stations, old freight tunnels, construction that was never finished. We try to keep them sealed, but people find ways in. Some of them have been living down there for years, maybe decades. We call them mole people." Most of the mole people stories were urban legends, but there was truth to some of it. Over the years, we'd found elaborate camps in abandoned tunnels, sometimes with electricity tapped from the main lines, even rudimentary plumbing, but those were usually near the surface, accessible. This was different. Deeper, older, more isolated. The tactical team entered first, with Gladys and me following as the officers most familiar with the scene. Hutchinson came too, to guide us through the unmapped sections. The hole led to a narrow tunnel that looked hand-carved rather than machine-cut. The walls were rough, uneven, and the floor sloped downward at an uncomfortable angle. "This isn't original construction," Hutchinson said, running his hand along the walls. "Someone dug this, probably over many years. It's connecting two tunnel systems that were never meant to be connected." We moved in formation, weapons drawn, lights creating a bubble of visibility in the oppressive darkness. The tunnel went on for maybe 100 yards before opening into a larger space, part of the original beach tunnel, according to Hutchinson. But it had been modified. The first thing we noticed was the smell: human waste, rotting food, and something else. Something metallic and sharp. Blood, but old blood, layered over time. The second thing we noticed were the modifications to the space. Sheets of corrugated metal had been used to create separate rooms or cells along one wall. Chains hung from the ceiling, some with restraints attached. "Jesus Christ," one of the tactical officers muttered. We began clearing the makeshift rooms one by one. Most were empty, but they showed signs of use. Mattresses on the floor, buckets in the corners, scratch marks on the walls. In one, we found women's clothing, torn and dirty. In another, jewelry and personal effects, wallets, phones, ID cards, dozens of them, maybe more. "Trophies," Gladys said quietly. "How long has this been going on?" I photographed everything while the tactical team continued to clear the area. In one of the ID cards, I recognized a name: Maria Rodriguez, reported missing 6 months ago. She'd been a Columbia student, last seen leaving a bar in Morningside Heights. Her case had gone cold after a week. Then we heard it. A whimper, barely audible, coming from the furthest room. The tactical team approached carefully, breaching the corrugated metal door. Sarah was inside, alive but barely conscious. She was chained to the wall, her clothes torn, a gash on her forehead still bleeding. But she was breathing, and when the EMT checked her, he said she'd probably be okay physically. The psychological trauma would be another matter. As they worked to free her, I noticed something else in the room, a notebook filled with meticulous handwriting. I gloved up and flipped through it. It was a log dating back 3 years. Names, dates, descriptions. Some entries ended with released, others ended with disposed. Maria Rodriguez's name was there. Her entry ended with disposed, flooding tunnel, waited. "We need divers in the flooded sections," I told Hayes, but we still hadn't found whoever was responsible for this. The tunnel system continued beyond the makeshift prison, and fresh footprints in the dust showed someone had fled recently, probably when they heard us coming. We pursued, following the footprints through a maze of connecting tunnels. Hutchinson tried to keep track of where we were, but even he seemed lost. These weren't on any maps, official or otherwise. Someone had spent years, maybe decades, creating their own private network beneath the city. The footprints led to a vertical shaft with a rusted ladder. The tactical team went up first, emerging into what Hutchinson identified as an abandoned Con Edison steam tunnel. The heat was oppressive, pipes hissing and groaning around us. The footprints continued, now joined by drops of blood. Whoever we were chasing had injured themselves on the rusty ladder. We followed the trail for another 10 minutes before reaching another shaft. This one leading up to a maintenance room in an active subway station. The door to the platform was open, and we emerged into the 14th Street station just as a train was pulling away. Our suspect was gone, vanished into the city above. But we had the notebook, and that was enough to start piecing together the horror of what had been happening beneath New York. The handwriting was analyzed. DNA was pulled from the living space, and within 48 hours, we had a name. William Carver, 57, a former MTA employee who'd been fired in 2018 for inappropriate behavior toward female colleagues. Carver had used his knowledge of the tunnel system to create his own underground kingdom. He'd been abducting women for at least 3 years, keeping them in his makeshift prison, and when he was done with them, disposing of the bodies in the flooded tunnels. The dive teams found 8 bodies in the flooded sections. 8 women who'd been reported missing over the past 3 years. Their cases gone cold, their families left wondering. We put out a citywide bolo for Carver, but he'd vanished. His apartment in Queens had been abandoned for months, neighbors said. He'd been living entirely underground, like some kind of urban predator, surfacing only to hunt. 3 days later, transit police spotted someone matching Carver's description entering the Canal Street station at 3 a.m. By the time units responded, he'd disappeared into the tunnels again. But now we knew he was still down there, still using the tunnel system. What followed was the largest manhunt in the history of the New York subway system. We had teams searching around the clock, using thermal imaging, drones, and dogs. The MTA shut down entire sections of track to allow us to search safely. But Carver knew those tunnels better than anyone. He'd spent years learning every passage, every hiding spot, every escape route. On the 5th day of the search, we got a break. A maintenance worker reported hearing strange noises from a supposedly sealed tunnel near Grand Central. We responded with a full tactical team and found another hideout, smaller than the first, hastily constructed. There were signs Carver had been there recently, including fresh food wrappers and a still-warm sleeping bag. But more disturbing, we found maps. Detailed, hand-drawn maps of the entire underground system, including tunnels that the MTA didn't even know existed. Carver had been mapping the underworld of New York for decades, finding forgotten passages, creating new ones, building an entire network that only he fully understood. On one of the maps, he'd marked several locations with red X's. We checked the first one and found human remains, skeletal, probably decades old. The second had more recent remains. By the time we'd checked all 7 marked locations, we'd found evidence of at least 15 more victims, some dating back to the 1990s. Carver had been doing this for much longer than 3 years. He'd been hunting in the tunnels for possibly 3 decades, perfecting his technique, learning to avoid detection. The women he'd grabbed were carefully chosen, people who wouldn't be immediately missed, whose disappearances could be explained away. Sex workers, drug addicts, runaways, and occasionally, like with Sarah and Maria, students who made the mistake of going out alone. We also found journals, different from the logbook. These were Carver's personal writings, and they were deeply disturbing. He wrote about the tunnels like they were alive, like they spoke to him. He believed he was meant to live down there, that the surface world had rejected him, but the tunnels had embraced him. He saw himself as some kind of underground king, and the women he took as subjects in his realm. One entry, dated just a week before we'd found his first hideout, was particularly chilling. They think they know these tunnels, but they know nothing. I am the tunnels now. I am in the walls, in the darkness between the tracks. They will search, but they will find only what I allow them to find. The deep places are mine, and I will return to them when the hunt above grows cold. The city forgets quickly. It always has. The manhunt continued for 2 more weeks. Every available officer was pulling overtime, and the FBI had joined the search. The media was calling Carver the Tunnel Terror, and the story had gone national. The pressure to find him was immense, especially as more victims were identified from the remains we'd found. Then, At 2:34 a.m. on a rainy Thursday night, we got the call. A woman named Jennifer, waiting for a late train at the 86th Street station, had seen someone matching Carver's description on the opposite platform. But when transit police arrived, he'd already descended onto the tracks and disappeared into the tunnel. This time, we were ready. We'd developed a new strategy based on Carver's own maps. Instead of chasing him through the tunnels, we'd seal off sections systematically, tightening the net until he had nowhere to run. It required coordination between NYPD, MTA, and even Con Edison to shut down certain steam tunnels. Gladys and I were part of Team 4, responsible for sealing the northern access points. We were stationed at a maintenance junction near 125th Street, a place where 3 different tunnel systems intersected. According to Carver's maps, this was one of his main travel routes. We'd been in position for 3 hours when Chester's voice crackled over the radio. All teams, we have movement in Section 7. Thermal imaging shows one person, moving north toward Team 4's position. My heart rate spiked. After 3 weeks of searching, we might finally have him. Team 4 ready, Gladys responded. We have eyes on all 3 tunnel entrances. We waited in the darkness, lights off to avoid alerting him. The junction was lit only by the dim emergency lighting, casting long shadows across the concrete walls. I could hear my own breathing, the distant rumble of trains on active tracks, and then footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps echoing from the eastern tunnel. Gladys and I exchanged glances. She nodded toward the other 2 officers with us, and we all took positions with clear lines of sight on the tunnel entrance. A figure emerged from the darkness. Even in the dim light, I could see it was him, William Carver, looking gaunt and filthy after 3 weeks on the run. He was carrying a backpack and what looked like a crowbar. He paused at the junction, perhaps sensing something was wrong. William Carver, Gladys announced, her voice echoing in the confined space. NYPD. You're surrounded. Drop your weapon and get on the ground. For a moment, Carver stood perfectly still. Then he laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't the laugh of someone who'd been caught. It was the laugh of someone who knew something we didn't. Surrounded, he said, his voice hoarse. You can't surround someone who knows these tunnels like I do. You think your maps are complete? You think you found all my places? He threw something, a smoke grenade. The junction filled with thick, white smoke. We heard running footsteps, but in the chaos it was impossible to tell which direction he'd gone. He's in the western tunnel, one officer shouted. No, eastern, another contradicted. I stayed focused on the northern tunnel, the one leading deeper into the system. Through the smoke, I thought I saw movement. Without thinking, I pursued. The tunnel was narrow, forcing me to duck in places. I could hear footsteps ahead, splashing through puddles of stagnant water. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, occasionally catching glimpses of Carver's fleeing form. Suspect heading north through auxiliary tunnel, I radioed. In pursuit. Lester, wait for backup. Gladys's voice crackled through. But I couldn't let him disappear again, not after what he'd done to all those women. The tunnel opened into a larger space, an abandoned pump room from the look of it. Massive pipes ran along the ceiling, and the sound of rushing water was louder here. Carver was at the far end, working at something on the wall. "Stop!" I shouted, weapon drawn. He turned, and I saw he'd opened some kind of access hatch. Behind it was another tunnel, but this one was different. It looked older, carved from solid rock rather than constructed with concrete. "You don't understand," he said. "I didn't start this. I just found it. There have been others like me for decades, maybe longer. The tunnels, they change people. They show you things. Put your hands where I can see them, I ordered, moving closer. Did you find them all? He asked. All my girls? Or just the recent ones? His smile was sickening. There are bodies down here from the 1800s, officer. The tunnels have always been hungry. You're sick, I said. Am I? Or am I just honest about what this city really is? You police the surface, but down here, different rules apply. Down here, the strong take what they want. It's been that way since they built these tunnels. Construction workers who disappeared, immigrants who vanished, and now, my girls. I heard backup arriving behind me. Gladys and the others entering the pump room. It's over, Carver, Gladys said. But Carver just smiled wider. You know what the oldest maps call this area? The tombs. Because they built it on top of an old cemetery. Native American, then Dutch, then whoever came after. Layers and layers of dead. And we built our city on top of them. Sometimes I wonder if that's why the tunnels feel alive. All those souls seeping into the concrete. Enough, Gladys said. You're under arrest. That's when Carver did something unexpected. He pulled a small device from his pocket. A dead man's switch connected to something in his backpack. Explosives, he said simply. Enough to bring down this whole section. I spent 3 years planning for this moment. If I can't have my kingdom, no one can. The pump room was directly beneath several active subway lines and a major water main. If he detonated explosives here, the damage would be catastrophic. Not just to the tunnels, but to the buildings above. You'd kill yourself too, I pointed out. I'm already dead, he replied. Have been, since the day they fired me, took away my life's work. The tunnels gave me purpose again. They showed me what I really was. What about all those innocent people above? Gladys asked. In the buildings, on the streets? Carver shrugged. The city demands sacrifices, always has. I'm just more honest about it. We were at a standoff. If we shot him, his hand would release the trigger. If we rushed him, same result. And every second we waited, more civilians were at risk. It was rush hour above, thousands of people traveling through the stations overhead. Then I remembered something from his journals. You said the tunnels spoke to you, I said, slowly lowering my weapon. What did they tell you? His eyes lit up with a fanatic's fervor. They told me I was chosen, that I was meant to be down here, to be part of something ancient. And if you blow it up, if you destroy the tunnels? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. They're your home, I continued. You said it yourself. You are the tunnels now. Would you really destroy the only place that accepted you? His hand wavered on the dead man's switch. The surface world rejected you, I said, taking a careful step forward. But the tunnels didn't. Don't destroy them out of anger at us. I could see him thinking, wrestling with the contradiction. His identity was so tied to the tunnels that destroying them would be destroying himself. Not just killing himself, but erasing everything he'd become. You could show us, I said, all those unmapped places, the history nobody else knows. Your knowledge would be preserved. It was manipulation, pure and simple, playing on his ego, his need to be important. But it was working. His grip on the switch was loosening. They'd put me in a cell, he said. Yes, I admitted, but you'd be alive. And your story, the tunnel's story, would be told. For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the rush of water through the pipes above us. Then, slowly, Carver set down the dead man's switch. The arrest was swift. Gladys had him in cuffs before he could reconsider. The bomb squad confirmed the explosives were real, enough C4 to cause a significant collapse. Carver had probably stolen it over his years working for the MTA, squirreling it away for this final contingency. As we let him out, Carver turned to me. "You want to know the truth, Officer Lester?" The real truth? I didn't respond, but he continued anyway. "I'm not the first, and I won't be the last. The tunnels call to certain people. Maybe it's the isolation, maybe it's the darkness, or maybe there really is something down there, something that's been here longer than the city. You felt it, didn't you? The weight of all that earth above you, the sense that the tunnels go on forever, that you could lose yourself down there and never be found. You're going away for a long time," I said. "Am I? Or will I disappear like the others?" "Check your records, officer. Every few decades, someone like me is caught. And every few decades, they vanish from custody, transferred to facilities that don't exist, or simply disappearing from their cells. The city protects its secrets." He was rambling, I told myself. The desperate fantasies of a serial killer trying to seem more important than he was. But later, when I did check the records, I found disturbing gaps. Suspects arrested in tunnel-related crimes who simply vanished from the system. Paperwork that led nowhere. Cases that were sealed without explanation. William Carver was formally charged with 18 counts of murder, 23 counts of kidnapping, and numerous other charges. The trial was set for 6 months later, and in the meantime, he was held at Rikers Island in solitary confinement, both for his own protection and for the safety of others. During those 6 months, I couldn't shake what he'd said. So I started digging into the history of the New York subway system, particularly the crimes that had occurred in the tunnels over the decades. What I found disturbed me more than I cared to admit. In 1978, a man named Theodore Banks was arrested for keeping 3 women prisoner in an abandoned section of tunnel near Times Square. The case files described a setup remarkably similar to Carver's. Makeshift cells, chains, trophies from victims. Banks was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But in 1981, he was supposedly transferred to a federal facility upstate. The problem was that facility had no record of ever receiving him. Theodore Banks had simply vanished from the system. In 1954, police found the bodies of 7 women in a sealed tunnel beneath Greenwich Village. The killer, identified as Marcus Webb, a former sandhog who'd helped build the tunnels, was arrested but never made it to trial. Official records said he'd committed suicide in his cell, but the coroner's report was missing, and 3 officers who'd been on duty that night gave conflicting accounts of what happened. In 1931, during the construction of the IND lines, a series of disappearances plagued the work crews. A foreman named Patrick O'Sullivan was eventually caught keeping workers prisoner in off-limits sections of the tunnel. He claimed he was feeding the tunnels, and that if he stopped, the entire system would collapse. O'Sullivan died in custody before he could be tried. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but witnesses reported seeing him being removed from the jail in the middle of the night by men in suits who never identified themselves. The pattern went back even further. Before the subway, when New York's underground was just sewers and utility tunnels, there were stories. Workers who went missing. People who claimed to hear voices in the pipes. And always, someone who seemed to be orchestrating disappearances from within the system itself. I brought my findings to Lieutenant Hayes, expecting her to dismiss them as coincidence or conspiracy theory. Instead, she closed her office door and told me something that still haunts me. "There's a task force," she said quietly. "Has been since the 1950s, completely off the books. They monitor the tunnels, track these incidents, and sometimes, when someone like Carver is caught, they make decisions about what happens next." "What kind of decisions?" I asked. "The kind that prioritize the stability of the city over justice," she replied. 8 million people live above those tunnels, Lester. What would happen if they knew that every few decades someone like Carver emerges? That the tunnels themselves seem to create these predators? There would be panic. So, they just make them disappear? Hayes shrugged. I don't know the details. I don't want to know, but Carver won't make it to trial. He'll be transferred, or he'll have an accident, or he'll simply vanish. And in a few months, everyone will forget. The city always forgets. I wanted to argue, to insist that justice be done properly. But part of me understood the brutal logic of it. The story of the tunnel terror had already caused a 30% drop in subway ridership. People were afraid to use the system that the entire city depended on. If the full truth came out, that this had been happening for over a century, that there was something about the tunnels themselves that seemed to breed these killers, what then? 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin, I got the call. William Carver had been found dead in his cell. The official cause was suicide. He'd somehow managed to hang himself despite being on suicide watch, despite the cameras, despite the round-the-clock monitoring. The media barely covered it. The city moved on. But Gladys and I knew the truth. Or at least, we knew there was a truth being hidden. The dive teams continued to find bodies in the flooded tunnels for another month. The final count was 31 victims, spanning nearly 30 years. Each one was properly identified, their families notified, and cases closed. Sarah, the urban explorer we'd rescued, made a full physical recovery, though she needed extensive therapy for the trauma. She moved back to her parents' house in Ohio and, as far as I know, never returned to New York. The tunnels where Carver had built his kingdom were sealed, this time with reinforced concrete barriers and modern surveillance equipment. The MTA implemented new security protocols, including regular sweeps of abandoned sections and better tracking of terminated employees with tunnel access. But sometimes late at night when I'm on patrol, I think about what Carver said, about the tunnels calling to certain people, about the patterns that go back decades, maybe centuries, about the task force that Hayes mentioned, still out there, still watching, still making people disappear when necessary. A year after Carver's death, Gladys retired early. She said she couldn't do it anymore, couldn't walk the streets knowing what was beneath them. She moved to Arizona, about as far from any subway system as she could get. We talked on the phone occasionally, and she told me she still had nightmares about the tunnels. Still woke up thinking she could hear that tapping sound that had lured those kids deeper into the darkness. I stayed on the force. Someone had to. Someone who knew the truth, or at least part of it. I became the unofficial expert on tunnel crimes. The one they called when someone went missing near the subway, when urban explorers reported strange findings, when MTA workers refused to enter certain sections alone. Over the next 2 years, I investigated dozens of cases. Most were straightforward. Homeless individuals who'd died of exposure, urban explorers who'd gotten lost, the occasional suicide. But every now and then, I'd find something that didn't fit. Scratch marks on tunnel walls that looked deliberate, like someone marking territory. Personal belongings arranged in patterns that suggested obsessive behavior. And twice, I found what looked like the beginnings of new hideouts. Rough beds, collections of tools, maps of the tunnel system with certain areas circled. Each time, I reported it to Hayes, and each time the sites were quickly cleaned up, the evidence removed, the cases closed without explanation. I learned not to ask questions. Then, 3 years after Carver's arrest, I got a call that changed everything. It was 3 a.m. on a cold February night. Chester, still working dispatch after all these years, radioed me directly. "Lester, we've got a situation at City Hall Station. Same entrance as before." Caller reports screaming from below. My blood ran cold. Send backup. Multiple units. Already en route, but Lester. The caller said something else. Said she saw someone go down there. Someone in an old MTA uniform. I arrived at the scene to find the same cut chain, the same open access door. But this time, there was something else. A message spray-painted on the wall. The king is dead. Long live the king. We went down with a full tactical team. The tunnels were different now. Many of Carver's passages had been sealed, but someone had been digging new ones. Fresh tool marks on the walls, recent excavation. And in the old City Hall station we found another hideout under construction. Chains freshly installed, cells being built from scavenged materials. But whoever was doing this had learned from Carver's mistakes. There were no personal effects, no journals, no DNA evidence. Just the beginning of another kingdom beneath the city. We never found who was responsible. The construction stopped after we discovered it, but I knew it was just a matter of time. Hayes was right. The city forgets. And in forgetting, it allows the cycle to continue. I'm writing this now because I'm retiring next month. 30 years on the force is enough. I've seen too much, know too much. The weight of it is crushing me. Every time I hear about a missing person, I wonder if they're in the tunnels. Every time I take the subway, I think about what's in the darkness beyond the platform lights. The official records will show that William Carver was a lone predator who was caught and died awaiting trial. They won't mention the pattern going back decades. They won't mention the task force that still operates in the shadows. They won't mention that even now, someone is probably down there, setting up shop in some forgotten corner of the vast tunnel system. Because the truth is too terrible to acknowledge. New York City, one of the greatest cities in the world, is built on top of a network of tunnels that seem to create monsters. Whether it's the isolation, the darkness, the weight of all that earth and concrete, or something else. Something about those tunnels changes people, brings out the worst in them. Or maybe it just attracts those who already have that darkness inside them. I've left detailed files with someone I trust, someone outside the department. If something happens to me, if I disappear like Carver did, at least there will be a record. At least someone will know the truth, but I don't think they'll come for me. I've been a good soldier, kept my mouth shut when it mattered, and I'm leaving the city anyway, following Gladys's example. I've bought a small house in Montana, about as far from any major city as I can get. No subways, no tunnels, just mountains and sky. Sometimes I get calls from younger officers asking for advice about tunnel cases. I tell them to be careful, to never go down alone, to always trust their instincts when something feels wrong. But I don't tell them the whole truth. How could I? How do you tell someone that beneath their feet is a labyrinth that has been eating people for over a century? That the city they've sworn to protect harbors something that can't be stopped, only contained? Chester retired last year. Before he left, he told me something that still gives me chills. He said that sometimes, late at night, he'd get 911 calls from numbers that didn't exist. Voices reporting crimes in tunnels that had been sealed for decades. He'd learned to ignore them, to delete the recordings, to pretend they never happened. It was easier that way. The new generation of cops doesn't know what we know. They think the subway is just a transportation system, the tunnels just infrastructure. They don't understand that it's an ecosystem, one that occasionally produces apex predators like William Carver. They don't know about the task force, about the cover-ups, about the pattern that goes back to the city's founding. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe ignorance really is bliss. But if you're reading this, if you're a cop or a transit worker or just someone who uses the subway regularly, remember this. Stay in the light. Don't go into the abandoned sections. Don't follow strange sounds. And if you see someone who seems too comfortable in the darkness, who knows the tunnels too well, who looks at other people like prey, report it immediately. Because the tunnels are still there, still dark, still waiting. And somewhere in that darkness, the next William Carver is already beginning to build his kingdom. The city will survive. It always has. But the price of that survival is the occasional sacrifice to the darkness below. We just try to make sure it's not too many, not too often, and never anyone who will be missed too much. That's the real horror. Not that monsters exist, but that we've learned to live with them, to accept them as part of the cost of modern life, to forget them as soon as they're gone, because remembering would mean acknowledging that they'll be back. They always come back. The tunnels make sure of it. My name is Officer Marvin Torres, and I've been with the NYPD for 7 years. What happened on that November night atop the Cromwell building still haunts me, not because of the violence I witnessed, but because of the conspiracy it uncovered. It was November 18th, 11:23 p.m., and I was working solo patrol in Manhattan's financial district. The radio crackled with an unusual call from dispatch. Unit 4-7, we have a witness reporting suspicious activity on the rooftop of the Cromwell building, 85 Wall Street. Possible assault in progress. The Cromwell building was a 42-story luxury residential tower with a rooftop that had been closed for 3 months due to construction. No one should have been up there, especially not at this hour. Unit 4-7 responding. How did the witness observe the rooftop? Witness is Beatrice Coleman, residing at 90 Wall Street, Unit 3902. Says she has a clear view from her apartment window. I arrived at the Cromwell to find Frank Patterson, the night security guard, adamant that no one had accessed the roof. "I've got the only working key card," he insisted, showing me the access log. "See? No entries since 5 p.m. when the construction crew left." "I need to check anyway," I said. Frank led me to the service elevator, explaining the increased security measures since a piece of stonework had fallen from the roof 3 months ago. New locks, cameras, motion sensors. Nobody gets up there without us knowing. But when we reached the 42nd floor and Frank swiped his card, we both froze. The reinforced steel door to the rooftop was wide open, its lock mechanism twisted and broken from the inside out. That's impossible," Frank stammered. I drew my weapon and flashlight. "Call for backup. Stay here." The rooftop was a maze of construction equipment and scaffolding. The November wind was brutal, cutting through my uniform as I carefully advanced through the cluttered space. My flashlight beam caught something that made my stomach drop. A trail of blood leading toward an HVAC unit. Behind it, I found James Rothstein, 44, a resident of the building and managing partner at Rothstein, Klein & Associates. His throat had been cut with surgical precision. But what disturbed me more was what surrounded him. Dozens of documents, weighted down with rocks against the wind. Financial records, wire transfers, bank statements, all showing massive embezzlement from client accounts. The papers showed systematic theft spanning 5 years, targeting elderly clients and charitable foundations. Nearly $30 million siphoned off into offshore accounts. The evidence was meticulous, comprehensive, and damning. I was photographing the scene when I heard movement. 20 feet away stood a young woman in an oversized maintenance uniform, her hands covered in blood. "Don't move," I commanded, weapon drawn. She raised her hands slowly. "Officer, my name is Rachel Morrison. I was his assistant. He's been stealing from Holocaust survivors, from children's cancer funds, from people who trusted him. I tried reporting it to the SEC, the FBI, but he had connections everywhere. So you killed him." I brought him up here to confront him with the evidence, to make him confess, but he laughed. Said no one would believe a secretary over him. Said he'd destroy me like he destroyed the others who tried to expose him. Others? 3 whistleblowers in 5 years. 1 died in a car accident, 1 committed suicide, and 1 simply disappeared. I knew I was next. Backup arrived, officers including Hector Ramirez. As Hector took Rachel into custody, I called the witness. Beatrice Coleman answered immediately. "Officer, is everything all right?" Something felt rehearsed about her concern. "Miss Coleman, can you describe exactly what you saw?" "I have insomnia. I was using my telescope, I'm an amateur astronomer, when I saw 2 figures on the roof. One appeared to attack the other, but her story didn't add up. The Cromwell's rooftop would have been completely dark, and her viewing angle was awkward at best. She was too prepared, too specific. I'll need to take your statement in person," I said. At her apartment, Beatrice showed me the telescope positioned perfectly to view the Cromwell's roof. Then she handed me something unexpected, a burner phone. "I received a text at 11:10, she admitted. "It said to watch the Cromwell rooftop at 11:15 if I wanted to see justice being served." "Who sent it?" "I don't know. But 3 months ago, my daughter Emma worked at Rothstein's firm. She discovered the embezzlement and tried to report it. 2 weeks later, she died in a subway accident. Pushed onto the tracks, witnesses said, though no one saw who did it. The case went cold." "You think Rothstein was involved?" "I know he was. Emma had recorded conversations, gathered evidence. It all disappeared from her apartment after she died. Back at the precinct, Rachel Morrison's story checked out. The financial documents were authentic, showing an elaborate embezzlement scheme. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division took over, and what they found was staggering. Rothstein had been running a massive fraud operation, using his firm as a front. But there was more. Security footage from the building showed a 16-minute gap, from 10:47 to 11:03 p.m. Someone had deliberately erased it. When we checked other cameras, we found Frank Patterson, the security guard, accepting an envelope from someone 3 weeks earlier. Frank disappeared that night. His apartment was empty, his bank account showing a $50,000 deposit from an offshore account 2 weeks prior. Detective Maria Santos from Major Crimes took over the investigation. "This wasn't just about Rothstein," she told me. "Someone orchestrated this entire thing, getting Rachel onto that roof, ensuring Beatrice would witness it, paying off the guard. This was an execution disguised as vigilante justice." We found more evidence in the following days. 3 other employees at Rothstein's firm had received anonymous packages containing evidence of his crimes. Each package came with instructions. Stay silent until November 18th. Then we discovered something that changed everything. Hidden behind construction equipment on the roof was a concealed room containing sophisticated surveillance equipment. Someone had been monitoring the entire building, recording conversations, copying files, watching everything. The equipment was military grade, the kind used by intelligence agencies. Every apartment in the building had been under surveillance for months, maybe years. We'd stumbled onto something much bigger than embezzlement or murder. The FBI took over within hours. Special Agent Diana Foster arrived with a team of technicians who immediately began cataloging the surveillance equipment. "Officer Torres," she said, pulling me aside, "what you found here is a matter of national security. Several residents of this building have connections to defense contractors, foreign governments, and financial institutions that handle federal pension funds. The surveillance room contained terabytes of recorded data, conversations, phone calls, emails, video footage. Someone had been building detailed profiles on every resident, documenting their routines, their connections, their vulnerabilities. Was Rothstein running this? I asked. We don't think so. He was a target, just like everyone else. Someone was watching him steal, documenting every transaction, waiting for the right moment. Detective Santos called me the next day with new information. We found Rachel Morrison's brother, Thomas Morrison, former Army intelligence, specialized in surveillance operations. He supposedly left for Dubai 3 months ago, but the company there has no record of him. I started connecting dots. Thomas's military background, the professional surveillance setup, the precise timing of everything. He'd been helping his sister, but this went deeper than sibling loyalty. Security footage from nearby buildings showed Thomas entering the Cromwell building multiple times over the past 3 months, always in maintenance coveralls, always at night. He'd been mapping the building, learning its weaknesses, installing equipment. But the real breakthrough came when we tracked the serial numbers on the surveillance equipment. It had been purchased by a shell company called Vector Security Solutions. The company existed only on paper, but its funding traced back through multiple offshore accounts to a surprising source: a non-profit organization called the Manhattan Justice Foundation. The foundation's stated mission was to help victims of white-collar crime. Its board of directors included retired judges, former prosecutors, and notably Beatrice Coleman. I confronted her at her apartment. This time, I brought Hector as backup. You knew about the surveillance, I said. You were part of it. Beatrice didn't deny it. After my daughter died, I met other victims of powerful men like Rothstein. People who'd lost everything to embezzlement, fraud, corruption. The system had failed us all. So you created your own system? We created accountability. The surveillance was meant to gather evidence of crimes that would otherwise go unpunished. Rothstein was just the first. There are dozens of others in buildings across the city. That's illegal surveillance, invasion of privacy. Is it worse than letting criminals operate with impunity? The FBI has those drives now. They'll find evidence of crimes they never knew existed. Insider trading, money laundering, bribery, all documented, all indisputable. Hector stepped forward. Who else is involved in this? Beatrice smiled slightly. More people than you'd think. People tired of watching the wealthy destroy lives without consequence. She was arrested, but within hours a team of high-powered lawyers arrived. The case against her was complicated. While the surveillance was illegal, the evidence it had uncovered was leading to multiple federal investigations. Over the next week, the scope of the conspiracy became clear. The Manhattan Justice Foundation had cells operating in 5 major cities. They recruited people with military or intelligence backgrounds, people who'd lost family members to white-collar crime, people with access to buildings and security systems. Thomas Morrison was found dead in Montreal, apparent suicide, though the circumstances were suspicious. The note he left behind read, "I did what was necessary." Emma Coleman deserved justice. They all did. Rachel Morrison's lawyer revealed that her cancer diagnosis was real. Stage 4 pancreatic, 6 months to live at most. She'd volunteered to be the one to confront Rothstein, knowing she had nothing to lose. She wanted her death to mean something, the lawyer said. If she was going to die anyway, she wanted to take a monster with her. The FBI discovered similar operations in Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, and Miami. Luxury buildings with surveillance networks, all connected to victims of financial crimes. It was a nationwide network of vigilantes, using technology to document crimes the system had ignored. But then things took a darker turn. Agent Foster called me in for a private meeting. We found something troubling in the data. Not all the surveillance was about catching criminals. Some residents were being blackmailed. She showed me files, business executives forced to resign, politicians changing their votes, judges making unexpected rulings, all coinciding with large anonymous donations to certain charities, all run by the Manhattan Justice Foundation. They weren't just gathering evidence, Foster said. They were using it to manipulate the system, forcing outcomes they deemed just. Beatrice claims she didn't know about the blackmail. Says that was never the intention, but someone in the organization went rogue, or maybe this was always the plan. The investigation expanded. The NSA got involved, Homeland Security, even the CIA. What had started as a murder on a rooftop had exposed a shadow organization operating across the country. Then Beatrice Coleman disappeared. Her ankle monitor was found cut in her apartment. Security footage showed her leaving with 2 suitcases, getting into a car with diplomatic plates. The plates were fake. The car abandoned at Newark Airport, but she never appeared on any flight manifests. 2 days later, I received a package at my apartment. No return address, hand-delivered. Inside was a hard drive and a letter. Detective Torres, the organization I helped create, was corrupted. What began as a search for justice became something else, something I never intended. The surveillance networks are still active, still recording. Those now in control have their own agenda. This drive contains everything: names, locations, access codes. The FBI has most of it, but not all. They're compromised too. Some of their agents are part of this. Trust no one completely, not even your partner. The real puppet masters are still hidden. Look for the name Victor Cross. BCI turned the drive over to Agent Foster, but kept copies of certain files. Call it insurance or paranoia, but something about Beatrice's warning stuck with me. A week later, Foster told me the investigation was being classified. National security, she said. Too sensitive for public knowledge. What about the victims? The families who lost everything? They'll receive compensation from seized assets. But the full truth can't come out. It would undermine faith in the financial system, the justice system, everything. So we just pretend it didn't happen? We pretend it was smaller than it was. Rothstein was a criminal who was killed by a disgruntled employee. The surveillance was his private operation. Case closed. But it wasn't closed. Not for me. I started noticing things about Hector. How he always volunteered to handle sensitive evidence. How he had access to federal databases he shouldn't. How certain leads would mysteriously go cold when he was involved. One night, I followed him after shift. He drove to a building in Midtown, used a key card to enter through a service entrance. The building housed several federal agencies, including an NSA satellite office. When I ran a deep background check using sources outside NYPD, I found gaps in his history. His military service record was partially classified. His transfer to NYPD came with recommendations from people who didn't seem to exist. Beatrice had been right. My partner was watching me. I kept working with Hector for 3 more months, pretending I didn't know what he was. Every case we worked, every conversation we had, I wondered what he was reporting and to whom. The paranoia was eating at me, but I had to be smart about this. Meanwhile, the Rothstein case had been officially closed. Rachel Morrison died in custody. The cancer took her faster than expected. The official story was simple. A dying woman killed her criminal boss in a moment of desperate justice. The surveillance equipment was explained as Rothstein's own paranoid security system. The public bought it, but I kept investigating on my own time. The name Beatrice had mentioned, Victor Cross, appeared in fragments throughout financial records, always one step removed from anything concrete. Shell companies registered to V-Cross International. Wire transfers authorized by V-Cross Holdings. But no person, no face, no real identity. Then, on a cold February night, I got another call about a rooftop. This time, it was the Meridian Tower on Park Avenue. Another luxury building, another restricted rooftop, another body. The victim was Douglas, CEO of a pharmaceutical company. He'd been found by maintenance workers, dead from what appeared to be a fall. But I recognized the pattern immediately. The rooftop door's lock had been compromised from the inside. There were documents scattered around the body, evidence of price fixing on life-saving medications, causing thousands of deaths among those who couldn't afford treatment. Hector and I were first on scene. Suicide? He suggested, examining the body, but his tone was off, like he was proposing a narrative rather than investigating. Maybe, I said, playing along while documenting everything. The maintenance worker who'd found the body was nervous, sweating despite the cold. I wasn't supposed to be up here, he admitted, but I got a text saying there was an emergency repair needed. Who sent it? I don't know. The number's not in our system. Another orchestrated discovery. Another witness guided to the right place at the right time. That's when I found it. A small surveillance camera hidden in an air vent, positioned to record the entire rooftop. It was the same model we'd found at the Cromwell building. "Hector," I called, "look at this." But when I turned, he was on his phone, speaking quietly. He ended the call quickly when he saw me watching. "FBI is on their way," he said. "This is their jurisdiction now." Since when do we call the FBI for a potential suicide? Since it involves a CEO under federal investigation. He paused. "You didn't know?" Douglas was about to be indicted. This saves everyone a lengthy trial. Agent Foster arrived within 20 minutes. Too fast for a normal response. She'd been waiting for this call. "Detective Torres," she said, pulling me aside while her team took over the scene. "We need to talk." She led me to a corner of the rooftop, away from everyone else. "We know you've been investigating on your own," she said. "We know about the copies you made of Beatrice Coleman's files." My hand instinctively moved toward my weapon, but she raised her hand peacefully. "Relax, we're not here to arrest you. We need your help." "With what?" "Finding Victor Cross. Or rather, understanding what Victor Cross really is." She pulled out a tablet, showing me surveillance footage from various buildings around the city. Each showed similar scenes: rooftops with bodies, scattered evidence, orchestrated discoveries. 17 deaths in the past year, she said. All wealthy individuals involved in crimes that the justice system failed to prosecute. All killed in the same way, with evidence of their crimes left for us to find. The Manhattan Justice Foundation? No. They've been dormant since Beatrice disappeared. This is something else. Something more organized, more professional. We think Victor Cross isn't a person. It's a protocol. A system for eliminating threats to social stability. Threats? These were criminals. Yes, but their crimes were destabilizing entire sectors. Douglas price fixing was about to cause a healthcare crisis. Rothstein's embezzlement would have collapsed 2 pension funds. Each death prevented larger catastrophes. So, someone's playing judge, jury, and executioner based on utilitarian calculus. Someone, or something? The patterns are too perfect, the timing too precise. We think it might be an AI system, analyzing data from the surveillance networks, identifying targets, orchestrating their elimination. That's insane, is it? We live in a world where algorithms determine what we see, what we buy, who we date. Is it so hard to believe one might determine who lives and dies? She showed me more files. Each victim had been under surveillance for months before their death. Their crimes documented, the potential impact calculated, the method of elimination chosen for maximum efficiency and minimum collateral damage. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you're one of the few people who knows the truth and isn't part of the system. Your partner, Hector, he's not who you think he is." "I know. NSA, CIA, neither. He's part of something older, something that predates the digital age, a group that's been managing threats to stability since the Cold War. They've adapted to modern technology, integrated AI into their operations. Victor Cross is their latest evolution." "And you want me to do what exactly?" "Help us stop them, or at least understand them, because right now we have no idea how deep this goes or how to fight it." I agreed to help, but I knew I was stepping into something dangerous. That night I went home and set up new security measures. Cameras, alarms, deadman switches on my evidence files. If something happened to me, everything would go public. 3 days later, Hector invited me for a drink after shift. We went to a cop bar in Brooklyn, the kind of place where everyone minds their own business. After 2 beers, he leaned in close. "I know you know," he said quietly. I tensed, ready for anything. "And I know you're working with Foster," he continued. "That's good. She's one of the few clean feds left. So, what are you?" "Someone trying to prevent chaos. This city, this country. It's more fragile than people realize. A few key deaths, the right scandal at the wrong time, and everything collapses. We prevent that. By killing people? By removing cancer before it spreads. Douglas would have caused a healthcare crisis that killed thousands. Rothstein would have destroyed retirements for tens of thousands. We calculate the harm and act accordingly. Who gives you the right? No one. That's the point. We exist outside the system because the system is broken. Courts can be bought, politicians can be corrupted, but mathematics doesn't lie. The greatest good for the greatest number. And Victor Cross, he smiled. Victor Cross is what we call the protocol. When someone meets certain criteria, wealth, power, criminal activity, and systemic risk, they become a Victor Cross target. The name is a joke. Victory over the cross we bear, the burden of necessary evil. The AI Foster mentioned, not AI. Just very smart people with very good data. Though we are experimenting with predictive algorithms. Imagine being able to prevent crimes before they happen. Eliminate threats before they materialize. That's not justice. That's assassination. Justice is a luxury for stable societies. We provide stability so others can afford justice. He finished his beer and stood. You have a choice, Marvin. Keep investigating and become a problem, or accept that some things are necessary evils and go on with your life. Foster can't protect you if you become a threat to stability. Is that a threat? It's math. You're not wealthy or powerful enough to be a Victor Cross target. But accidents happen, muggings go wrong, people disappear. He left me there with the check and a decision to make. That night, I sat in my apartment, looking at all the evidence I'd gathered. The surveillance networks, the orchestrated deaths, the shadow organization managing it all. I could expose everything, but Hector was right. It would cause chaos. Or I could stay quiet and let the killing continue. I made my choice that night. I would keep investigating, but smarter, more carefully. If there really was a shadow organization eliminating threats to stability, I needed to understand it fully before acting. The next morning, Agent Foster called me. We need to meet, not at Federal Plaza, somewhere public. We met at Grand Central Station during rush hour, surrounded by thousands of commuters. The noise and crowd would make surveillance difficult. Your partner visited you last night, she said. It wasn't a question. You're watching me too? We're watching everyone involved in this. That's how we know the situation is escalating. 3 more Victor Cross targets were eliminated last night. All in different cities, all at exactly 11:47 p.m. The same time Rothstein died. They're accelerating their timeline. Something big is coming. She handed me a folder. Inside were profiles of dozens of wealthy individuals, all involved in various crimes. Next to each name was a percentage: 87%, 72%, 91%. Probability of becoming a Victor Cross target, she explained. Our analysts reverse engineered their selection criteria. These people will likely die within the next month unless we stop this. Why not arrest them for their crimes instead? With what evidence? Most of what we have came from illegal surveillance. It wouldn't hold up in court. That's the genius of the Victor Cross Protocol. They know the legal system's limitations. I studied the list. Some names I recognized from headlines. A pharmaceutical executive, a hedge fund manager, a city planning commissioner. All people who'd been accused but never convicted of serious crimes. There's something else, Foster said. Beatrice Coleman made contact. My head snapped up. She's alive? Very much so. She sent us a message through encrypted channels. She wants to meet with you specifically. Tonight. Roosevelt Island, the abandoned smallpox hospital ruins. That's a trap. Maybe. But she included information only she could know. Details about the surveillance networks we haven't made public. She says she knows how to stop Victor Cross. That night, I went to Roosevelt Island alone, against Foster's advice. The abandoned hospital was a crumbling Gothic structure, off limits to the public but popular with urban explorers. I found Beatrice in what used to be the main ward, standing by a glassless window overlooking the East River. "Detective Torres," she said without turning. "Thank you for coming. Everyone thinks you're dead." A necessary fiction. The organization needed to believe they'd eliminated me as a threat. She turned, and I saw she'd aged years in months. "I've been investigating from the shadows, just like you. Foster says you know how to stop Victor Cross. Not stop. Expose. There's a difference." She pulled out a tablet. Victor Cross isn't just one organization, it's 3. Sometimes working together, sometimes in competition. Government, corporate, and criminal. Each has their own criteria for elimination, their own methods. She showed me a complex diagram. Names, connections, financial flows. The government faction, which your partner belongs to, focuses on national security threats. The corporate faction eliminates those who threaten economic stability. The criminal faction is the most interesting. They're actually former law enforcement, judges, prosecutors who got tired of seeing justice denied. 3 separate groups, all killing people. All using the same protocol, the same name. It provides cover, confusion. If one faction is exposed, the others continue, like a hydra. How do we expose them? We don't. We make them expose each other. She pulled up another screen. Each faction has been documenting the other's activities, gathering blackmail material. They maintain détente through mutual assured destruction. But what if that balance was disrupted? She showed me a list of upcoming targets. One name stood out: Judge Harold Brennan, scheduled for elimination in 3 days. Brennan is corrupt, taking bribes from human traffickers, Beatrice explained. The criminal faction wants him dead, but he's also a government asset, feeding information to the NSA. If he dies, the government faction will retaliate. You want to start a war between them? I want them to destroy each other. In the chaos, evidence will surface. The public will learn the truth. People will die. People are already dying. At least this way, it ends. I thought about Hector's warning, Foster's investigation, the growing list of bodies on rooftops. What do you need from me? Access to police communications. When Brennan dies, the first responders need to find specific evidence, documents that implicate the government faction. I've already arranged for similar evidence about the criminal faction to surface at Federal Plaza. Foster is compromised. She's not part of Victor Cross, but her superiors are. They're using her investigation to identify threats to their operation. Everything suddenly made terrible sense. Foster's quick responses, her detailed knowledge, her inability to make arrests. She was being played just like I was. If I do this, the city will explode. Cops against feds, feds against criminals, everyone pointing fingers. And in that chaos, the surveillance stops, the killing stops, and maybe real justice has a chance. I took the tablet with the evidence. 3 days, 11:47 p.m., 3 days from now, be ready. I left Roosevelt Island with the weight of the decision crushing me. I could prevent a war between shadow organizations, or let it happen, and hope the truth would set the city free. The next day, I watched Hector more carefully. He was nervous, checking his phone constantly, having hushed conversations. Something was coming, and he knew it. 2 days before Brennan's scheduled death, another body appeared on another rooftop. This time, it was a banker involved in money laundering for cartels. But something was different. The evidence left behind implicated other bankers, politicians, even police officers. Someone was accelerating the exposure. Foster called an emergency meeting. Someone's hijacking the Victor Cross protocol. The factions are getting nervous, suspicious of each other. We need to move now. But I knew it was Beatrice. She wasn't waiting for Brennan's death. She was creating chaos early, forcing the factions to act. That night, Hector confronted me again. Whatever you're planning with Beatrice Coleman, stop. You don't understand what you're about to unleash. Mass surveillance? Targeted assassination? That's already unleashed. Controlled, managed. What she wants is anarchy. Thousands will die in the chaos. As opposed to the hundreds dying now, those hundreds prevent millions from suffering. Every Victor Cross target is chosen because their continued existence threatens stability. We're surgeons removing cancer. You're murderers with a god complex. He pulled out his gun, though he didn't point it at me. I don't want to hurt you, Marvin, but I will if you force me. The protocol is clear. Anyone who threatens to expose the operation becomes a target. Then do it. Add another body to another rooftop. He hesitated, and in that moment I saw the conflict in his eyes. He believed in what he was doing, but he also knew it was wrong. You have 12 hours, he said finally. Disappear. Leave the city, leave the country if you can. After that, you're a target. He left, and I knew I'd never see him again. At least, not as partners. I had 12 hours to make a choice, run and live, or stay and probably die. But there was a third option. I could accelerate Beatrice's plan. I took the evidence she'd given me and added my own. Every file I'd copied, every recording I'd made, every piece of the conspiracy I'd uncovered. Then I did something probably stupid, but definitely necessary. I walked into the New York Times building and asked to speak to their senior investigative reporter. 3 hours later, as I was leaving the building, my phone rang. It was Foster. What did you do? What needed to be done? You've killed us all. You know that, right? Every agent, every cop who knows about this. We're all targets now. Then we better move fast. The story broke online at 11:47 p.m., exactly 72 hours before Judge Brennan was supposed to die. Shadow organization conducts assassination campaign in major cities, the headline read. Within an hour, it was everywhere. The response was immediate and chaotic. The FBI raided buildings across the city. The NYPD arrested 3 federal agents. A judge issued warrants for CEOs who'd supposedly been dead for months. The surveillance networks were exposed. The Victor Cross protocol leaked. The 3 factions turned on each other exactly as Beatrice had predicted. Hector disappeared that night. His apartment was cleaned out. His records erased. Officially, he'd never existed. Foster was found dead 2 days later. Officially a suicide, but we all knew better. Judge Brennan survived. He was arrested instead of assassinated, and his testimony exposed even more of the conspiracy. Beatrice Coleman was never found, despite a worldwide manhunt. Sometimes I wonder if she ever really came back, or if that meeting on Roosevelt Island was with someone else entirely. The official death toll from the Victor Cross scandal was 47. People eliminated by the protocol over 3 years. The unofficial toll was probably 3 times that. The collateral damage from the exposure, suicides, disappearances, mysterious accidents, added dozens more. But the surveillance networks were dismantled. The killings stopped. The shadow organizations were exposed and scattered. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was better than the alternative. I resigned from the NYPD the day after the story broke. Officially for personal reasons, actually, because I'd received 3 death threats and knew more were coming. I left New York, left the country, actually. I'm writing this from a small town whose name I won't mention, where I work a job that has nothing to do with law enforcement. Sometimes I check the news from New York. Crime is up, they say. Corruption is returning. The systems that kept order through fear are gone, and nothing has replaced them yet. I wonder if we made things better or worse. But then I remember those bodies on rooftops, those surveillance cameras in bedrooms, those decisions about who lived and died made by people who'd appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner. And I know we did the right thing. The city will survive. It always does. It will find new ways to fight crime, new systems of justice that don't require shadow organizations and targeted killings. It might take time, it might be messy, but it will be legitimate. As for Victor Cross, the protocol might be exposed, but the idea behind it, that some people deserve to die for the greater good, that's as old as humanity itself. Somewhere, in some city, someone is probably starting a new version, convinced they can do it better, cleaner, more justly. They're wrong, of course, but they won't realize that until it's too late. Until bodies start appearing on rooftops again. My name is Officer Clifford Washington, and I've been with the NYPD for 9 years. Most of those years were routine. Traffic stops, domestic disputes, the occasional robbery. But what happened in the condemned Brewster building in the South Bronx changed everything I thought I knew about my job and my city. It was January 14th, 2:17 a.m., bitter cold, with a wind that cut through even the heaviest jacket. I was working the overnight shift out of the 42nd Precinct when the call came in. The dispatcher sounded confused, which should have been my first warning. Unit 19, we have a caller reporting someone trapped in the Brewster building on East 138th Street. Caller says they can hear someone calling for help from inside. I knew that building. Everyone in the precinct did. The Brewster had been condemned for 5 years after a partial collapse killed 2 people. It was scheduled for demolition, but legal battles over ownership had kept it standing, a 10-story monument to urban decay. Dispatch: the Brewster's been sealed for years, probably just squatters. Caller insists it's not squatters. Says the voice sounds like a child. Name's Vivian. She lives in the building across the street. A child. That changed everything. Even if it was unlikely, we couldn't ignore the possibility of a kid being trapped in that death trap. Unit 19 responding. Request backup. Backup's tied up with that incident on Fordham. Supervisor Julia says to make initial assessment and call if you need assistance. I arrived at the Brewster to find it exactly as I remembered. Windows boarded up. Entrance sealed with chain-link fencing and warning signs. The building looked like a broken tooth in the skyline, dark and rotting. I was checking the fence for breach points when someone called out behind me. "Officer, thank God you're here." A woman in her 30s, Asian, wearing pajamas under a heavy coat. She was carrying a baby monitor of all things. "Are you Vivian?" "Yes." "Listen." She held up the monitor. Through the static, I could hear something. It was faint, but it sounded like crying. A child's crying. "Ma'am, that could be interference from anywhere." "No, it's not." I've been picking it up for 3 nights now, always between 2 and 4 a.m. It gets stronger when I point it at that building. She aimed the monitor at the Brewster, and the crying did seem to intensify. I have a 2-year-old. I know what a scared child sounds like. I examined the fence more carefully and found what I was looking for. A section near the corner had been cut and hastily wired back together. Someone had definitely been going in and out. "Ma'am, I need you to go back to your apartment. If there's someone in there, it might not be safe." "What about the child?" "I'll handle it. Please, go inside." She reluctantly returned to her building, but I could see her watching from her window. I pulled out my radio and called it in, then cut through the weak wiring and entered the condemned building. The lobby was a disaster zone. The ceiling tiles had fallen, creating a carpet of moldy debris. Graffiti covered every surface. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing used needles, empty bottles, the detritus of people seeking shelter or privacy for their vices. But there were also fresh footprints in the dust. Adult-sized, multiple sets, leading toward the stairwell. I followed them up. The stairs were treacherous. Some steps were missing entirely, others creaked ominously under my weight. On the 3rd floor, I heard it clearly for the first time. Crying, definitely a child, coming from somewhere above. "Police! Is anyone there? I'm here to help." The crying stopped immediately, replaced by silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I continued up, each floor more deteriorated than the last. On the 6th floor, I found evidence of recent habitation. Sleeping bags, canned goods, battery-powered lanterns. But everything was arranged too neatly, too deliberately. This wasn't a squatter's camp, it was something else. Then I found the photographs. They were taped to the wall, dozens of them. All children, various ages, all looking scared or drugged. My blood went cold. I'd stumbled onto something much worse than I'd imagined. I immediately called for backup. "This is Unit 19. I need immediate assistance at the Brewster building. Possible child endangerment situation. Multiple victims." The radio crackled with static, then Supervisor Julius's voice came through. "Clifford, did you say child endangerment?" "Affirmative. Found evidence of..." A sound behind me made me spin around. A man stood in the doorway, tall and thin, wearing work clothes. He had his hands raised, but something about his smile was wrong. "Officer, thank God you're here," he said. "I'm the night watchman. We've been having problems with people breaking in. There's no night watchman for this building, it's condemned." His smile widened. You sure about that? That's when I noticed the others. They emerged from doorways and shadows. 3 more men, all watching me with that same unsettling calm. Where's the child? I demanded, hand on my weapon. What child? The first man asked. We haven't seen any child. But even as he spoke, I could hear the crying again, fainter now, coming from the floors above. I'm going to need to see some identification, I said, trying to maintain control of the situation. Of course, officer. The man reached into his pocket slowly, but instead of ID, he pulled out a phone. He showed me the screen. It was playing a recording of a child crying. Amazing what technology can do, he said. You can make people hear anything, make them go anywhere. I drew my weapon. Everyone on the ground now. But they didn't move. They just stood there, watching me. Officer Clifford Washington, the man said, and my blood froze. I hadn't told him my name. 9 years on the force, good record. Wife Marina, daughter Sophie, lives at 2847 Grand Concourse, apartment 4B. How do you? We know everything about everyone who comes here. That's our job, to know, to watch, to manage problems. What problems? The kind that threaten certain operations. The kind that ask too many questions. I kept my weapon raised while backing toward the stairs. My backup is on the way. No, they're not. Supervisor Julius works with us. He sent you here alone for a reason. Julius. I'd known him for 5 years. He'd been to my daughter's birthday party. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. What is this place? I asked. A distribution center, or it was until the building got condemned. But condemned buildings are perfect for our purposes. No one comes here. No one cares what happens here. Distribution of what? Information. The kind that certain people pay very well to obtain. The kind that can destroy lives or save them, depending on who's buying. I was processing this when I heard footsteps on the stairs below. My backup, finally. But the man just smiled wider. That's not your backup, officer. More men entered the room. I counted 6 total now, all positioned to block any exit. Here's what's going to happen, the first man said. You're going to put down your weapon. You're going to forget what you've seen here, and you're going to go home to your family. Not happening? Then your family pays the price. Marina works at Presbyterian Hospital. Night shifts in the ER. Very dangerous neighborhood. Anything could happen. And Sophie, such a beautiful little girl. Be a shame if Child Services got an anonymous tip about neglect. You threaten my family. We don't threaten. We explain consequences. Everything is a choice, officer. Choose wisely. I heard a child cry again, but this time I knew it was a recording. Everything here was fake, manufactured, designed to lure people in. But why? Why the recording of a child? I asked. Because it works. Good people, cops especially, can't ignore a child in danger. It brings you running every time. And once you're here, we have leverage. For what? Sometimes we need evidence to disappear. Sometimes we need cases to go cold. Sometimes we need good cops to look the other way. Everyone has a price, officer. Family is usually it. I thought about Marina, about Sophie, about the oath I'd taken to protect and serve, about the photographs on the wall that might not be real victims. I need proof my family will be safe, I said, lowering my weapon slightly. Smart man. Julius will contact you tomorrow with instructions. You'll file a report saying the building was empty, just acoustic anomalies. Then you'll go about your life knowing you made the right choice. And if other cops come, we'll be gone within the hour. This place will be empty. No evidence we were ever here. Just another abandoned building full of nothing. I holstered my weapon, hating myself for it, but they were right. I couldn't risk my family. "Good choice," the man said. "Now leave. And officer, don't come back, don't investigate, don't be a hero. Heroes' families tend to have accidents." I left the Brewster building that night feeling like a coward and a traitor. My hands shook as I filled out the report. Building empty, no signs of recent activity, probable acoustic echoes causing false reports. Every word was a lie. Vivian was waiting by my patrol car. "Officer, did you find anything?" I heard the crying stop after you went in. "The building's empty, ma'am." Sometimes sound travels strangely in these old structures, probably coming from somewhere else. Her face fell, but I was so sure. "Go home, ma'am. Get some sleep." She walked away, clearly unconvinced. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the condemned building, watching for any sign of movement. But true to their word, within an hour, several vans pulled up. Men loaded equipment quickly and efficiently. By 4 a.m., they were gone. The next morning, Julius called me into his office. He was a big man, had played college football before joining the force. I'd always respected him. Now I could barely look at him. "Close the door, Clifford." I did, then sat across from him. "Your report from last night, the Brewster building. What about it? That was good work. Knowing when to walk away is as important as knowing when to push forward. Is that what we're calling it? Walking away?" He leaned back in his chair. "You have no idea what you stumbled into last night. Those men you met? They're connected to people who make the cartels look like church groups. Information brokers who sell secrets to the highest bidder. Foreign governments, corporations, anyone with deep enough pockets. And you work for them? I work with them. There's a difference. They help us solve cases sometimes, provide information we couldn't get legally. In exchange, we occasionally look the other way. That's corruption. That's survival. This city runs on compromises, Clifford. Always has. You think we could keep 8 million people from tearing each other apart with just badges and good intentions? Those photographs on the wall? Props, psychological manipulation. They profile everyone who might investigate them, know exactly what buttons to push. For cops, it's always kids in danger. How do you know they were props? Julius's expression darkened. Because I've been doing this for 15 years. I know where the lines are. And if they were real, they weren't. But I saw doubt in his eyes. He didn't know for sure either. Stay away from the Brewster, Clifford. Stay away from Vivian. Do your job, go home to your family, and forget last night happened. I nodded and left his office, but I had no intention of forgetting. That evening, I went home and hugged Marina and Sophie extra tight. Marina noticed something was wrong. "Bad day?" she asked after Sophie was in bed. "Bad night, can't talk about it." She understood. Cop's spouse knew when not to push. But as she slept, I lay awake thinking about those photographs, about the men in that building, about Julius's complicity. The next day, I did something stupid. I ran the building's ownership records, traced shell companies, followed paper trails. The Brewster had changed hands 6 times in 5 years, each time to a different LLC with no clear owner. But buried in the financial records, I found a pattern. Each sale corresponded with major data breaches. Equifax, Target, even government databases. The building was being used as a physical location for digital crimes. I started documenting everything, creating my own file. I couldn't go to internal affairs. Julius would know immediately. I couldn't go to the FBI. I didn't know how deep the corruption went. So I investigated alone, carefully during my off hours. 3 days later, Vivian called 911 again. "The crying is back," she reported. "Same building, same time." Dispatch assigned another unit, but I intercepted. I needed to know if they were back. I arrived to find the fence repaired, no signs of entry, but Vivian was outside again, holding her baby monitor. "Listen," she insisted. And there it was, a child crying. But something was different this time. It sounded more real, more desperate. "Ma'am, I need you to go inside." "You're going in again?" "Just checking the perimeter." But as soon as she was gone, I cut through the fence again. I had to know. The building was different this time. Emptier, darker. My footsteps echoed as I climbed the stairs. On the 6th floor where the camp had been, I found nothing but dust and debris. The photographs were gone. No sign anyone had been there. But the crying continued, coming from above. I climbed to the 8th floor, then the 9th. The crying grew louder, more distinct. This wasn't a recording, this was real. On the 10th floor, in what used to be a corner apartment, I found her. A girl, maybe 7 years old, chained to a radiator. She was dirty, terrified, but alive. The moment she saw my uniform, she started sobbing harder. "It's okay," I said, rushing to her. "I'm police. I'm here to help." The chains were new, heavy-duty. I had to call for bolt cutters, which meant calling for backup, which meant Julius would know. But I didn't care anymore. This was a real child in real danger. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Amy," she whispered. "Amy Huang." The name hit me like a punch. Amy Huang had been missing for 2 weeks, abducted from Queens. Every cop in the city had her picture. "How long have you been here, Amy?" "I don't know. Days. They kept moving me." "Who's they?" "Men. They said they were police, but they weren't nice like you." My radio crackled. "Unit 19, what's your status?" I recognized the voice. Officer Danny Martinez, one of the good ones. "Danny, I need bolt cutters and an ambulance at the Brewster Building, 10th floor." I found Amy Huang. There was silence, then, "Amy Huang, the missing girl? Clifford, are you sure?" "I'm sure." "And Danny, come quiet, no sirens." "Copy that." While we waited, I talked to Amy, keeping her calm. She told me about the men who took her, how they'd kept her in different buildings, always abandoned, always moving. They'd been using her to lure someone, she said, but she didn't know who. Then she said something that chilled me. They said Officer Washington would come. They knew your name. It had been a trap, but not for me. I was just the bait. They wanted someone else. Someone who would come when they heard I'd found Amy Huang. Martinez arrived with 2 other officers I trusted. We cut Amy free and got her to the ambulance. But as we were leaving, Julius arrived with a full tactical team. "Secure the building," he ordered. "Full sweep, every floor." "Julius, what's going on?" I asked. "You did good, Clifford." "Finding the girl, but the men who took her are still here." "The building's empty," I checked. "No, they're here." "They have to be." He was sweating, nervous. This wasn't about finding criminals. This was about finding something else. The tactical team swept the building while I stayed with Amy. She was dehydrated and scared, but physically unharmed. As the EMTs treated her, she grabbed my hand. "Officer Washington?" "They had pictures of you. And your family. They knew you'd come." "Why did they want me to come?" "Because of the other policeman. The big one. They said he'd come if you were in trouble. Julius. They'd used me to lure Julius." I ran back to the building just as gunfire erupted inside. The tactical team was in a firefight on the 7th floor. But when I reached them, the shooting had stopped. 3 men were down, the same ones I'd seen 3 nights ago. But Julius was nowhere to be found. We found him on the roof, standing at the edge, looking down at the street below. Julius? I approached carefully. He turned to me, and I saw tears on his face. They have everything, Clifford. 15 years of everything. Every bribe, every cover-up, every time I looked the other way. They were recording it all. Who are they? Internal Affairs. Federal agents. This whole thing. Amy, the information brokers, even you finding them. It was all a sting operation. They used that girl as bait to draw us out. Us? Every corrupt cop in the precinct. They have files on all of us. He laughed bitterly. Except you? You're the only clean one. That's why they chose you. Julius, step back from the edge. I can't go to prison, Clifford. I can't do that to my kids. Your kids need their father. No, they need to not have a convicted felon for a father. He pulled out his phone, showed me a video. It was him taking money from one of the men downstairs, dated 3 years ago. This is just one of dozens. I'm finished. Julius, please. But he stepped back from the edge on his own, hands raised. You're right. I'm not a coward. He pulled out his gun and set it on the ground. I'll face what I've done. Federal agents swarmed the roof moments later. They arrested Julius and explained the operation to me. Amy Huang had been a real kidnapping victim, but they'd found her 2 days ago. With her parents' permission and a child psychologist present, they'd used her to draw out a corruption ring that had been operating for over a decade. The information brokers were real, but they were also informants, trading testimony for reduced sentences. The whole thing had been orchestrated to expose corrupt cops who'd been protecting criminal operations throughout the city. The next 48 hours were chaos. Federal agents descended on the 42nd precinct like locusts, interviewing everyone, seizing files, turning our house upside down. 17 officers were arrested, including Julius and 3 sergeants I'd worked with for years. I was cleared immediately. The feds had been watching me since I'd first entered the Brewster building. They knew I was clean, which is why they'd let the operation continue. I was the controlled variable, they called it. The one honest cop they could count on to react predictably. Special Agent Rebecca Foster. No relation to the agent from the Rothstein case, just coincidental name. Debriefed me in a federal building downtown. Officer Washington, you've been under surveillance for 3 weeks, she said. We apologize for using you, but we needed someone with an impeccable record who would do the right thing regardless of pressure. You used me as bait. We used your integrity as a tool. There's a difference. And Amy Huang? You really used a kidnapped child? Amy was rescued from her actual kidnappers 2 days before you found her. Her parents agreed to let her help us, with full psychological support and protection. She was never in real danger with us, but she was chained to a radiator. Loose chains she could have slipped out of any time. 2 agents were in the building the entire time, watching. We would never have let anything happen to her. I wanted to be angry, but I understood. The corruption was so deep, so entrenched, that normal investigative methods had failed. They'd needed something dramatic to crack it open. What about the information brokers? The men in the building? Career criminals who cut a deal? They've been selling information to foreign entities for years, but they kept records of every corrupt cop who helped them. In exchange for testimony, they're getting reduced sentences and witness protection. And Vivian? Foster smiled. One of ours, FBI agent, specializes in undercover work. The baby monitor was broadcasting on a frequency we controlled. She was the one guiding you to the right place at the right time. Everything had been fake. Every part of it orchestrated, controlled, managed. I'd been a puppet thinking I was making my own choices. The photographs on the wall, I said. The ones that looked like missing children. Props, just like Julius said. We needed to create a scenario that would force you to make a choice, your family's safety or doing the right thing. You chose to protect your family initially, which is human and understandable, but then you came back. That's what we were counting on. You were testing me? We were testing everyone. You passed. I left that meeting feeling violated and vindicated at the same time. I'd done the right thing eventually, but I'd been manipulated into it. The next day, I was called to another meeting, this time with Deputy Commissioner Harold Morgan. "Officer Washington," he said, "you've been through a lot. The department owes you an apology and a debt of gratitude. I was just doing my job." "No, you were doing everyone's job. While 17 officers were taking bribes and looking the other way, you maintained your integrity. That's rare and valuable. What happens now? The 42nd Precinct is being restructured. New leadership, new policies, new oversight. We need good cops to help rebuild. I'm offering you a promotion to sergeant, effective immediately, with your choice of assignments." It was everything I'd worked for, handed to me because I'd been an unwitting pawn in an FBI operation. It felt wrong. I need to think about it. Take your time. But Clifford? The department needs people like you now, more than ever. I went home to Marina and Sophie, trying to process everything. Marina knew something big had happened. The news was full of stories about the corruption bust, but I couldn't tell her how central I'd been to it all. That night, Vivian, or whatever her real name was, knocked on my door. "My name is actually Agent Sarah Park," she said. "I wanted to apologize in person. For using me? For deceiving you. You're a good cop, Officer Washington. You deserved better than to be manipulated." Did I have a choice? If I'd walked away that first night, would you have let me? She hesitated. "No, we would have found another way to draw you in. The operation was too important." So, I never had free will in this. You always had free will. You could have taken the bribe, joined Julius's network, protected your family by becoming corrupt. You chose not to. That was real. After she left, I sat with Sophie as she slept, watching her breathe, thinking about the world she was growing up in. A world where good and evil weren't clear-cut, where even the good guys used deception and manipulation to achieve their goals. The next morning, I went to visit Julius in federal detention. He looked older, defeated. "Come to gloat?" he asked. "Come to understand?" He leaned back in his chair. "You want to know how it started?" Simply, a traffic stop, 10 years ago. Guy had a trunk full of cash, obviously dirty. Instead of arresting him, I took a payment to let him go. Just once, I told myself. Just enough to pay for my kids' medical bills. And then they owned me. Each favor led to another. Each payment made the next one easier. Before I knew it, I was coordinating with them, protecting their operations. I told myself I was still a good cop, that I was managing the situation, keeping worse people from taking over. You were lying to yourself. Of course I was. But when you're in it, when your family depends on that money, when you've already crossed the line, there's no going back. There's always a choice. Easy to say when you've never been tested. What if Sophie got sick? What if Marina lost her job? What if someone offered you enough money to solve all your problems, and all you had to do was look the other way once? I wanted to say I'd never take it, but after everything I'd been through, I wasn't sure anymore. 3 weeks later, after the media attention died down, I was called to another condemned building, this time in Queens. Another report of someone trapped inside. My blood went cold. "Is this another operation?" I asked dispatch. Negative, standard call, but I didn't believe in standard calls anymore. Everything felt like a potential trap, a test, a manipulation. I arrived to find a genuine situation. Homeless veterans had set up camp in an old factory. One had fallen through rotted floorboards and broken his leg. No conspiracy, no corruption, just people needing help. As I coordinated the rescue, I realized something. I couldn't do this job anymore. Not because I was corrupt or compromised, but because I'd lost faith in the system itself. Every call, every situation, I'd be wondering who was pulling the strings, what the real agenda was. I submitted my resignation the next day. Deputy Commissioner Morgan tried to talk me out of it. "Washington, you're exactly the kind of officer we need." "No, sir. You need officers who believe in the system. I've seen too much to have that faith anymore." "What will you do?" "Private security. Investigation. Something where I know who I'm working for and why. This is because of the Brewster operation, isn't it? It's because I can't tell anymore where the good guys end and the bad guys begin. When federal agents use kidnapped children as props and corrupted cops think they're maintaining order, the lines are too blurred." I cleaned out my locker, turned in my badge and gun. 9 years of service ended not with a bang, but with quiet disillusionment. Marina supported my decision. "I knew something was eating at you," she said. "Better to leave than let it destroy you." But leaving didn't stop the nightmares. I still dreamed about the Brewster building, about finding Amy Huang, about Julius on that rooftop. I dreamed about all the condemned buildings in the city and wondered what was really happening inside them. 6 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. "Officer Washington?" The voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it. "I'm not an officer anymore." "Right, Mr. Washington then. This is Amy Huang's father. I wanted to thank you. The FBI saved your daughter, not me." "No, you saved her. When you found her in that building, when you comforted her, you were the first person in 2 weeks who made her feel safe. The FBI agents were using her, just like her kidnappers did in different ways. But you just saw a scared little girl who needed help. I was being used too. But you didn't know that. Your compassion was real. That matters." After the call, I sat in my new office. I'd started my own investigation firm and thought about what he'd said. Maybe that was the lesson in all of this, that even when we're being manipulated, even when the system is corrupt, individual acts of compassion and integrity still matter. My private investigation firm, Washington Securities, had been operating for a year when I got the call that would bring me back to the Brewster building one final time. It was Vivian, Agent Sarah Park, calling from a blocked number. "Clifford, we need your help. I'm not a cop anymore. I know. That's why we need you. You're outside the system now." "What's this about?" "The Brewster building. Something's happening there again, and it's not us this time." Despite every instinct telling me to hang up, I agreed to meet her. We met at a diner in Queens, neutral ground. Sarah looked tired, older. The undercover work had taken its toll. "After the corruption bust, the Brewster was supposed to be demolished," she said, "but the paperwork got tangled up again. And now people are disappearing near there." "Homeless people?" "No, city officials. 3 building inspectors, 2 demolition, contractors, and a lawyer handling the property dispute. All last seen near the Brewster. So investigate it." "We can't. Officially, the FBI is hands-off. The corruption bust created too much bad blood with NYPD, and the new precinct commander won't authorize resources for what he calls urban legends." "Urban legends?" She pulled out a file. "Read this." It was a collection of reports going back decades. The Brewster building had a history I'd never known about. Built in 1923 on the site of a potter's field, a mass grave for the unknown and indigent. During construction, workers reported finding hundreds of bodies, far more than records indicated. In the 1950s, a family of 6 disappeared from the building. In the 1970s, 3 separate murders occurred in the same apartment. In the 1990s, a cult used the basement for rituals before they all died in what was ruled a mass suicide, but had suspicious circumstances. Every time someone tries to demolish it, people involved in the demolition disappear or die, Sarah said. The city keeps condemning it, but it never comes down. You're talking about a cursed building. That's not real. I'm talking about patterns. Maybe it's not supernatural, but something about that building attracts violence and madness. Why come to me? Because you know the building. You've been inside multiple times and walked out unharmed, and because you're one of the few people who knows the truth about what happened there. The truth about the corruption bust, the truth about Julius. I tensed. Julius is in federal prison. No, he's not. She slid another file across the table. Julius died 3 months ago, suicide in his cell. But here's the thing. 2 witnesses saw him near the Brewster building last week. That's impossible. That's what we said. But we checked. The witnesses are credible. One of them is Detective Martinez, your old colleague. Danny Martinez was as solid as they came. If he said he saw Julius, he saw Julius. Maybe someone who looks like him, I suggested. Maybe, or maybe something else is going on. Will you help? Every rational part of me said no. But I thought about those missing people, about Julius, about all the unanswered questions from my time as a cop. I'll look into it. Unofficially. No promises. That night I drove to the Brewster building. It looked the same, broken, abandoned, waiting. The fence had been reinforced, topped with razor wire. New signs warned of prosecution and surveillance cameras that probably didn't work. I parked across the street and watched. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the same time I'd first been called there, I saw movement. A figure walked out of the building. Not through the fence, not through any visible door. They just walked through the solid wall like it wasn't there. It was Julius. He looked exactly as I remembered him, even wearing the same suit he'd worn the day he was arrested. He walked down the street, turned the corner, and vanished. I sat in my car, trying to process what I'd seen. Exhaustion, hallucination, trick of the light. I ran through every explanation, but I knew what I'd seen. The next night I came back with equipment. Cameras, motion sensors, electromagnetic field detectors. Things I'd never have used as a cop, but seemed necessary now. I set them up around the building's perimeter and waited. At 2:17 a.m., Julius appeared again. The cameras captured nothing. The motion sensors didn't trigger, but I saw him clearly. This time, he looked directly at me and smiled. Then he spoke, though his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "You should have taken the deal, Clifford." "You're dead," I said to the empty air. "Death is just another room in the building. We all end up here eventually. This isn't real. Real is relative. The building makes its own reality. Ask the inspectors, ask the contractors. They're here now, part of the structure, part of the system. What do you want?" The building wants what it's always wanted. To stand, to exist, to feed on the darkness people bring to it. Every crime, every death, every drop of spilled blood makes it stronger. Buildings don't want things. This one does. It's been wanting since before it was built, when this land was soaked with the forgotten dead. It called to the architects, influenced the construction. Every beam, every brick, placed according to its will. I wanted to run, but I stood my ground. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only one who might understand. You've seen how deep the corruption goes, how the system feeds on itself. The building is just a physical manifestation of that. It's where the city hides its sins. The missing officials tried to destroy it. The building defended itself. It always does. How do I stop it? Julius laughed, a sound like grinding concrete. You don't. You can't destroy corruption, Clifford. You can only manage it, contain it, work with it. The building will stand until the city falls. It's a monument to everything we pretend doesn't exist. He faded away, leaving me alone in the dark. I spent the next week researching, digging into city records, old newspapers, anything that mentioned the Brewster building. The pattern was clear. Every attempt to demolish it had ended in disaster. The building was protected by something, whether supernatural or just systemic corruption so deep it might as well be supernatural. I compiled everything into a report and gave it to Sarah. She read it with growing disbelief. You're saying the building is actually haunted? I'm saying something protects it. Call it what you want. But those missing officials aren't coming back, and more people will disappear if the city keeps trying to tear it down. So, what do? Leave it alone. Seal it completely. No one goes in ever. Let it rot on its own timeline. The city won't accept that. Prime real estate. Safety hazard. Then people will keep disappearing. She took my report to her superiors. I don't know what happened in those meetings, but 2 weeks later, the Brewster building was quietly removed from the demolition schedule. A new fence went up, this one solid concrete, 12 feet high. The building was erased from city maps, its address discontinued. But I knew it was still there, waiting. Marina asked me one night why I seemed so troubled. There are things in this city, I said, that shouldn't exist but do. Things that feed on our worst impulses and grow stronger from them. Like what? Like buildings that won't fall down. Like corruption that won't die. Like the darkness that lives in places we've abandoned. She held me close. Then we stay in the light. Yeah, we stay in the light. 3 years have passed since then. The Brewster building still stands behind its concrete wall. Occasionally, someone reports strange sounds from inside or claims to see figures in the boarded windows. The reports are filed and ignored. I've built a good business, investigating insurance fraud and corporate espionage. Clean, simple cases with clear answers. I don't take cases involving abandoned buildings or missing persons near condemned sites. I've learned my limits. Sometimes Danny Martinez calls me, tells me about weird cases that remind him of the Brewster. I tell him to walk away, to stick to normal crimes with normal criminals. He usually listens. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Julius's words, about buildings that want things, about corruption so deep it becomes physical, about the forgotten dead whose burial ground became a monument to the city's sins. I think about all the condemned buildings in New York, all the abandoned places where the city hides what it doesn't want to see. Each one potentially another Brewster, another trap, another hungry mouth waiting to feed. The city has always been built on graves, every foundation laid over bones, every skyscraper rising from soil enriched by the dead. We just pretend not to know it, pretend the past stays buried. But sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it rises, takes shape, becomes a building that won't fall down no matter how hard we try. The Brewster building is still there. It will always be there. A reminder that some things can't be demolished, can't be reformed, can't be saved. They can only be contained, walled off, left to rot in their own darkness. And we can only hope the walls hold. My name is Officer Raymond Cross, and I've been with the NYPD for 15 years. I've worked patrol in some of the toughest neighborhoods in Brooklyn, responded to countless emergencies, and seen things that most people only experience in nightmares. But nothing in my career prepared me for what happened during those 3 weeks in October, when the Brooklyn Bridge became the center of an investigation that challenged everything I thought I knew about my city. It started on October 3rd, a Thursday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was on patrol near the Manhattan entrance of the Brooklyn Bridge when dispatch came through my radio. Unit 7-4, we have a 10-54 at the Brooklyn Bridge. Maintenance crew requesting police presence. Possible suspicious package. A 10-54 was code for a possible dead body. Dispatch was being cautious, not wanting to alarm anyone listening to scanners, but I knew what it meant. Unit 7-4 responding, I replied, already turning my patrol car toward the bridge. The Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise is usually beautiful. The morning light reflecting off the cables, joggers getting their exercise, tourists taking photos. But that morning, there was something off about it. The maintenance crew had cordoned off a section of the pedestrian walkway, and a small crowd was already gathering. Tom Rodriguez, the head of the maintenance crew, met me at the barrier. I'd dealt with Tom before. He'd been maintaining the bridge for 30 years and had seen everything from suicide attempts to marriage proposals gone wrong. But that morning, his face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he lifted the tape for me to pass under. Officer Cross, thank God you're here. We found something during our morning inspection. I don't know how to describe it. Take your time, Tom. What did you find? You better see for yourself. He led me along the pedestrian walkway toward one of the bridge's massive stone towers. Most people don't know that these towers have interior spaces, maintenance rooms, equipment storage, old passages from when the bridge was built in the 1880s. Tom stopped at a maintenance store I'd passed hundreds of times, but never really noticed. It was painted to blend with the stone, marked only with a small, authorized personnel only sign. The door was open, which was unusual. These doors were supposed to be locked at all times, accessible only with special keys that few people had. Was this door open when you arrived? I asked. No, it was locked. We opened it for the monthly inspection. But, officer, what's inside? We haven't touched anything. We just backed out and called you. I pulled out my flashlight and entered the narrow passage. The walls were original stonework from the 1880s, damp and cold. The passage led to a small chamber, maybe 15 feet square, lit by a single bare bulb. What I saw there made me stop in my tracks. The room had been transformed into some kind of shrine. The walls were covered with photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All were of the Brooklyn Bridge, taken from every conceivable angle, in every type of weather, at every time of day. But these weren't tourist photos. Each one had dates and times written on them in meticulous handwriting, some going back decades. In the center of the room was a table covered with notebooks, maps, and what looked like architectural blueprints of the bridge. But what really caught my attention was the wall directly opposite the entrance. Someone had painted a massive mural of the bridge, but it was wrong somehow. The perspective was distorted, the cables seemed to writhe like snakes, and there were shapes in the water below that didn't belong there. Tom, I called back. How long since someone was in here? Last monthly inspection was September 3rd. Everything was normal then, just storage equipment and some old tools, 1 month. Someone had created all of this in 1 month. I photographed everything, then noticed something else. A camping cot in the corner, cans of food, water bottles. Someone had been living here. Recently, too, judging by the fresh apple core in a makeshift trash bin. I called for backup and began examining the notebooks. They were filled with observations about the bridge, but not the kind of notes an engineer or historian would make. These were personal, almost intimate. Entries like, October 1st, 3:23 a.m., the bridge sang tonight. Low frequency, almost below hearing. Lasted 17 minutes. September 15th, sunset, counted 1,847 people crossing. 3 stopped at the exact center. They heard it too. September 28th, 2 a.m. The cables are tightening. The bridge knows something is coming. The writing was neat, precise, but there was something disturbing about the content. Whoever wrote this believed the bridge was alive, that it was communicating somehow. My backup arrived. Officer Janet Miller, a 5-year veteran I'd worked with before. She whistled low when she saw the room. What do you think, Ray? Homeless person with mental health issues. Maybe, but look at this equipment. I pointed to the corner where surveying tools, expensive cameras, and what looked like sound recording devices were neatly arranged. This stuff costs thousands of dollars. And these blueprints, these are official city documents. You can't just download these off the internet. We spent the next 2 hours documenting everything. The photographs on the walls weren't random. They were organized chronologically, creating a visual timeline of the bridge spanning what looked like 40 years. Some of the older photos were Polaroids, faded with age. The newer ones were high-quality digital prints. Then Janet found something that changed the entire investigation. Ray, look at this. She was holding one of the notebooks, open to a page near the back. It was a list of names, each with a date beside it. I recognized some of them immediately. They were people who had jumped from the bridge. Suicides spanning the last 5 years. But here's what made my blood run cold. Beside each name was written, accepted or rejected, and the accepted ones all had additional notes like, heard the call, or understood the promise, or became part of the structure. We need to get a detective down here, I said. This is beyond a simple trespassing case. Within an hour, the small room was crowded with investigators. Detective Marcus Hammond from Major Crimes took over the scene. He was a tall, thin man with 20 years on the force, known for his methodical approach to unusual cases. Cross, you were first on scene. What's your take? Someone's been obsessed with this bridge for years, possibly decades. They've been living here, documenting everything, and they seem to have some connection to the suicide cases. Hammond nodded, studying the mural. This artistic style, I've seen it before. There was a case about 10 years ago, a series of break-ins at construction sites around the city. The perpetrator left similar murals, distorted perspectives, architectural subjects that seemed alive. We never caught them. You think it's the same person? Maybe. The case went cold after the break-in stopped. We assumed they'd left the city or died. A lot of these obsessive types, they don't last long on the streets. We were interrupted by Tom Rodriguez, who had been waiting outside. Officers, I just remembered something. About 3 weeks ago, one of my crew mentioned seeing someone on the bridge at odd hours. Not on the walkway, but actually on the cables, up high, where maintenance doesn't even go. We reported it, but by the time security checked, no one was there. Can you show us where? Tom led us out onto the bridge, pointing up at the massive cables that stretched toward the towers. There, about 60 feet up. My guy swore he saw someone walking on the cable like it was a sidewalk. No safety equipment, nothing. We thought he was seeing things. It was early morning, foggy. I looked up at the cables. At that height, without safety equipment, one slip would mean certain death. No one would risk that unless they were suicidal or they knew something we don't, Hammond said, finishing my thought. Cross, I want you to stay on this. You know this bridge. You know the area. Work with Miller. Canvass the neighborhood. Someone must have seen our mystery resident coming and going. Janet and I spent the rest of the day interviewing everyone we could find who regularly used the bridge. Joggers, commuters, the guys who sold souvenirs to tourists. Most had nothing useful, but then we met Samuel, an elderly man who walked the bridge every morning for exercise. I've seen him, Samuel said immediately when we showed him photos of the room. Or her, I couldn't tell. Always wore a long coat, hood up. But yes, I've seen someone going into that door. Usually very early, before sunrise. How often? Almost every day for the past month. But officer, here's the strange thing. I've been walking this bridge for 15 years, and I swear I've seen that same figure in that same coat for all those years. Always at odd hours, always alone. The same person for 15 years? Samuel shrugged. Same coat, same walk, same way of stopping at certain points on the bridge and just listening, like they're hearing something the rest of us can't. That evening, I went home troubled. My wife, Teresa, noticed immediately. Rough day? Strange day. We found someone living in the Brooklyn Bridge. Not under it, actually inside one of the towers. That's possible? Apparently. Teresa, you grew up here. Do you remember any stories about the Brooklyn Bridge? Urban legends, that kind of thing? She thought for a moment. My grandmother used to say the bridge demanded sacrifices. That's why so many people jump from it. The bridge calls to them. But that was just old superstition. What else did she say? That the builders put something in the foundation. Not just the bodies of the workers who died during construction. Everyone knows about those. But something else. Something to make the bridge last forever. She said that's why it's outlasted every other bridge from that era. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those notebooks, about the list of names, about someone walking on cables 60 feet above certain death. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep and decided to drive back to the bridge. The bridge at night is a different creature than during the day. The tourists are gone, traffic is minimal, and you can actually hear the structure itself. The cables humming in the wind, the subtle groans of metal and stone adjusting to temperature changes. I parked and walked onto the pedestrian path. I wanted to understand what our mystery person experienced here, what drew them to live inside the bridge itself. I was about halfway across when I saw them. A figure in a long coat, hood up, standing at the exact center of the bridge. They were perfectly still, facing east toward Brooklyn. I approached slowly, hand on my radio. NYPD. I need to speak with you. The figure didn't turn, but they spoke, and the voice was unlike anything I'd expected. Cultured, educated, and somehow ancient despite sounding relatively young. Officer Cross, I've been waiting for you. You know my name? I know everyone who truly sees the bridge. Most people cross it, use it, photograph it, but they don't see it. You saw my room, you saw my work. That means you're beginning to see. I need you to turn around slowly and show me your hands. The figure turned, and I saw a face that was simultaneously young and old, male and female, familiar and completely alien. It was as if multiple faces were superimposed on each other, shifting based on the angle of view. My name is Morgan, they said, and I've been the bridge's keeper for longer than you'd believe. How long? Since 1883. Since the day it opened. Since the day I helped build it. That's impossible. That would make you over 140 years old. Morgan smiled, and for a moment their face solidified into that of a young man, maybe 30. The bridge preserves what it needs. I was a worker on the construction crew. I fell from the caisson, should have died, but I heard the bridge's voice as I fell, and it offered me a choice: death or service. I chose service. I should have called for backup, should have arrested them for trespassing at minimum, but something kept me listening. What does the bridge want? To exist, to connect, to be remembered. Every bridge is a miracle, Officer Cross, a human defiance of natural barriers. But this bridge is special. It was built with intention beyond mere transportation. The designers, the workers, we put our souls into it. And in return, it gave us immortality. The people who jump, some hear the call and misunderstand it. They think it's calling them to death, but it's actually calling them to join it, to become part of something eternal. Those I mark as accepted, understood at the last moment. Their energy, their essence, strengthens the bridge. You're talking about human sacrifice. I'm talking about transformation. Every great structure requires sacrifice. The ancient builders knew this. That's why they buried people in foundations, why they mixed blood with mortar. Modern builders forgot this, which is why modern structures fail. But the Brooklyn Bridge remembers. A wind picked up, and I could swear I heard voices in it. Whispers, cries, laughter, all carried on the sound of the cables humming. "I need you to come with me," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "No, Officer Cross. You need to make a choice. You can arrest me, though I doubt I'll stay arrested for long. I've been through this before. You can try to expose the truth, though no one will believe you. Or you can understand that some things in this city are beyond law, beyond reason, and accept that the bridge needs its keeper. And if I refuse all of those options, then the bridge will choose a new keeper. It always does. Perhaps it's already chosen you. Why else would you be here at 3 a.m.? Why else would you see what others miss?" Before I could respond, Morgan stepped backward, over the railing, and fell. I rushed to the edge, looking down at the dark water below, but there was no splash, no sign they'd ever fallen. Then I heard their voice behind me. "The bridge protects its own, Officer Cross." I spun around, but the walkway was empty. I was alone on the bridge, with only the wind and the whispers for company. I didn't report my encounter with Morgan. How could I? No one would believe me, and I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. Maybe I dozed off in my car. Maybe the stress of the case had gotten to me. But when I returned to the precinct the next morning, I found Detective Hammond waiting for me with a grim expression. "Cross, we've got a problem." "The room in the bridge tower, it's empty." "What do you mean empty?" "Everything's gone. The photographs, the notebooks, the equipment, even that mural. The walls have been painted over. It's like it was never there." "That's impossible. We have photographs, evidence logs." "I know, but the physical evidence is gone. And here's the really strange part. The maintenance crew swears they locked that door yesterday evening when we finished processing the scene. But when they came this morning for us to continue the investigation, it was like the room had been reset to its original state. We drove back to the bridge together. Hammond was right. The room was completely bare, smelling of fresh paint. The only thing that remained was the faint outline of where the photographs had been taped to the walls, visible only if you knew where to look. "Someone's playing games with us," Hammond said. "They must have had a team come in overnight." But I knew better. I remembered Morgan stepping off the bridge and appearing behind me. If they could do that, clearing a room would be child's play. What about the digital evidence? Our photos? That's the only thing we have left. I've sent copies to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Maybe they can make sense of the notebook's contents. Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into researching the bridge's history. I spent hours in the city archives, the New York Public Library, anywhere that might have records from the bridge's construction. What I found was disturbing. The Brooklyn Bridge's construction was famously deadly. At least 20 workers died during the building process, possibly more. But the official records had gaps. There were references to workers who simply disappeared, never confirmed dead but never seen again. And there were strange reports from the time, workers claiming to hear voices in the caissons, the massive wooden boxes used to dig the foundations underwater. Several workers reported that the bridge spoke to them while they worked in the compressed air environment. I found a journal entry from Washington Roebling, the chief engineer who supervised the bridge's construction after his father died. Most of his writings were technical, precise, but one entry stood out. The bridge demands its due. Father knew this, I believe, which is why he insisted on the specific placement of the foundations. Not for engineering reasons, the calculations would have worked with different positions, but for something else. The workers feel it. Some have taken to leaving offerings at the tower bases. I should stop this superstition, but I find myself reluctant. Perhaps they understand something I do not. The more I dug, the more references I found to workers who seemed to develop an unusual attachment to the bridge. Several were reported to have continued visiting the construction site long after their employment ended, some even after suffering debilitating injuries from the work. On October 7th, 4 days after we'd discovered the room, another call came in. A jogger had found a body on the bridge at dawn, but this wasn't a jumper. The body was on the pedestrian walkway, laid out carefully with arms crossed, facing the sky. I arrived to find the area already cordoned off. The victim was a middle-aged man, well-dressed, no obvious cause of death. But what made everyone nervous was his expression. Perfectly peaceful, almost euphoric. No ID, Officer Miller told me. But look at his hands. The man's palms had strange marks, not injuries exactly, but patterns that looked almost like the cable designs of the bridge itself, as if they'd been branded or tattooed there. But the marks seemed to go deeper than skin, like they were part of his flesh. The medical examiner, Dr. Lisa Park, was puzzled. No signs of violence, no drugs in the preliminary field test. If I had to guess, I'd say he just stopped living, like his body decided it was done. That's not medical terminology, Doc? No, but it's the best I can offer right now. I'll know more after the autopsy. While the scene was being processed, I walked to where the body had been found. It was almost the exact center of the bridge, the same spot where I'd encountered Morgan. Looking down, I noticed something odd about the walkway boards. They were worn in a pattern, as if thousands of people had stood in exactly this spot. But the wear pattern was too precise, too deliberate. It formed a shape, a circle with radiating lines, almost like a compass rose or a ritual diagram. "Find something?" Hammond asked, approaching. I pointed out the pattern. He knelt down, tracing it with his finger. This would take years to form naturally, decades maybe, or one person standing here repeatedly for a very long time. That afternoon, we got an ID on the body. Marcus Webb, 47, a structural engineer who worked for the city's Department of Transportation. He'd been part of the team assessing the Brooklyn Bridge for necessary repairs. According to his supervisor, Webb had become obsessed with the bridge over the past month, staying late to review old blueprints, talking about design elements that weren't in any official documentation. He kept saying the bridge was more complex than we understood, His supervisor, Janet Crawford, told us that there were chambers and passages not on any blueprint. We thought he was having a breakdown. Did he mention finding anything specific? He said he'd found evidence of additional foundations, deeper than the official ones. Said the bridge was anchored to something besides bedrock. Management told him to focus on the actual repair assessments, but he couldn't let it go. Webb's apartment was a smaller version of the room we'd found in the bridge. Photos, diagrams, calculations covered every wall. But these weren't observations. They were theories. Webb had been trying to map what he called the true structure of the bridge. According to his notes, the Brooklyn Bridge had been built on a much older foundation, something predating European settlement of Manhattan. He'd found references in old Native American oral histories to a crossing place between worlds, a spot where the physical and spiritual realms touched. The bridge had been built on this exact spot. "This is insane," Hammond said, reading through Webb's notes. He's talking about ley lines, sacred geometry, dimensional gateways. But I noticed something else in Webb's research. Photographs of other people, all taken on the bridge. Each photo was labeled with a date and a single word: potential. One of the photos was of me, taken 3 days ago, standing at the center of the bridge. That night, unable to sleep again, I found myself drawn back to the bridge. This was becoming a pattern, I realized. The same compulsion that Webb must have felt, that Morgan certainly felt. The bridge was calling, and I was answering. This time, I wasn't alone on the walkway. There were others, maybe a dozen people, all standing at different points along the bridge. They didn't acknowledge each other, didn't speak, just stood there as if waiting for something. I approached one, a young woman who looked like a college student. "Excuse me, are you okay?" She turned to me slowly, as if waking from a dream. "Oh, yes, I like to come here at night. It's peaceful." "Do you come here often?" "Every night for the past week. I don't know why. I just feel like I need to be here." I asked the others similar questions and got similar answers. They were all drawn here, compelled by something they couldn't explain, and they'd all started coming within the last month. "It's gathering them," a familiar voice said behind me. Morgan stood there, looking exactly as they had before. Ageless, androgynous, impossible. "The bridge, it's calling them, just like it called you, like it called Webb. Webb is dead. Webb is transformed. He understood what the bridge offered and accepted it. His body couldn't contain what he became, so it was discarded. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about evolution. The bridge is more than steel and stone, Officer Cross. It's a living system, an organism that spans both the physical and metaphysical. These people feel its pull because they have the potential to understand this. And if they don't understand, then they go home, confused but unharmed. The bridge only takes those who choose to be taken. Like the suicides?" Morgan's expression darkened. "Those are failures. People who hear the call but misinterpret it as a call to death rather than transformation. I try to prevent those when I can, but I can't be everywhere. Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to be faced with a choice soon, and I want you to make it with full knowledge. The bridge has chosen you as a potential keeper. Webb was another candidate, but he tried to understand it intellectually rather than intuitively. The bridge requires both. I'm a cop. I uphold the law. And what law covers this? What statute applies to a structure that exists partially outside normal space-time? You've seen the evidence, Officer Cross. You know this isn't a conventional crime." Before I could respond, my radio crackled. Emergency call. Another body on the bridge. But this time, It was someone I knew. Detective Hammond was found at the bridge's Brooklyn Tower, unconscious but alive. When the EMTs revived him, he was incoherent, talking about seeing the structure beneath the structure and the weight of all those souls. At the hospital, I sat with him as he stabilized. His first clear words were, "Cross, I followed you last night. I saw you talking to someone, but when I looked directly at them, they weren't there. Or they were there, but also weren't. I can't explain it. What happened after that? I felt it pulling me, the bridge, like it was inside my head, showing me things, the real history, the true purpose. Did you know there are rooms throughout the bridge? Not just maintenance spaces, but actual rooms, furnished, lived in. I saw people there, but they were wrong. Too old, but looking young, or young, but moving like they were ancient. Hammond, you need to rest. No, listen. I found something in the tower before I passed out. There's a records room hidden behind what looks like solid stone. The bridge keeps records, Cross. Every person who's ever crossed it, ever touched it, ever died on it. Their names are carved into metal plates, thousands of them, millions maybe. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength. Your name was there, Cross. But it wasn't in the past section. It was in the future section. Dated October 31st this year. October 31st, 3 weeks away. Hammond was sedated before he could tell me more, but his words echoed in my mind. The bridge had already decided my fate, apparently. But decided what exactly? I went back to Webb's apartment looking for anything about October 31st. In his calendar, that date was circled with a note. The anniversary. Anniversary of what? I searched through historical records and found it. October 31st, 1883, was exactly 5 months after the Brooklyn Bridge opened to the public. But more importantly, it was the date of a major accident during construction that had been covered up. A section of the bridge had collapsed, killing several workers. Their bodies were never recovered, allegedly swept away by the river. But there were rumors they'd been entombed in the bridge itself, sealed inside the stonework to hide the construction company's negligence. My phone rang. Dr. Park from the medical examiner's office. Cross, you need to see this. Webb's autopsy. It doesn't make sense. I met her at the morgue. She pulled back the sheet on Webb's body, and I saw immediately what she meant. The patterns on his hands had spread, now covering his entire body. But more disturbing, when she made an incision, the patterns continued inside. His organs, his bones, even his brain tissue showed the same cable-like designs. This is impossible, Doctor, Park said. These patterns go down to the cellular level. It's like his entire body was restructured according to some kind of blueprint. The bridge's blueprint? She looked at me strangely. That's a weird thing to say, but yes. The patterns match the stress diagrams of the Brooklyn Bridge's cable system. It's like he was becoming part of it. I left the morgue with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. The bridge wasn't just a structure. It was something far more complex, far more alive than anyone realized. And it had plans for me. That evening, I went home and told Teresa everything. She listened without interrupting, then said something that surprised me. My grandmother was right, wasn't she? About the bridge being alive. I don't know, maybe. Ray, I want you to stay away from it. Request a transfer, take vacation time, anything. Please. I can't. There are people in danger. Those who are being called to the bridge. Someone needs to protect them. Who protects you? I didn't have an answer for that. That night I dreamed of the bridge. But in the dream I could see inside it, see the hidden rooms Hammond had mentioned. They were filled with people, all working on something, maintaining, building, creating. They looked happy, fulfilled in a way I'd never seen in living people. One of them turned to me, and I recognized him from old photographs. Washington Roebling himself, the bridge's chief engineer, who died in 1926. He smiled and said, "The work continues, Officer Cross. It always continues. The bridge is never finished, only becoming." I woke to find the cable patterns from Webb's body faintly visible on my own palms. The marks on my palms were undeniable, faint but clearly visible. The same cable patterns that had covered Webb's body. I tried scrubbing them off, used every cleaning product I could find, but they weren't on my skin. They were in it, part of it. I called in sick the next day, October 8th, first time in 5 years. Lieutenant called me personally. "Cross, Hammond told me some disturbing things from his hospital bed. He says you're involved in something dangerous regarding the bridge." "Lieutenant, I need to ask you something. Have you ever had cases involving the Brooklyn Bridge that didn't make sense? Things that got buried or explained away?" There was a long pause. "Why are you asking?" "Because I think there's a pattern. People disappearing, dying, changing, all connected to the bridge." "Cross, come to my office. Not the precinct, my home office. Tonight, 8 p.m., and Ray, don't go near the bridge until we talk." That day, I researched October 31st more thoroughly. The accident in 1883 was barely documented, but I found references in workers' letters home. 17 men had died when a temporary support structure collapsed. But the letters suggested something else, that the collapse wasn't accidental. The workers had been conducting some kind of ceremony, trying to appease the bridge's hunger. One letter, from an Irish immigrant named Patrick O'Brien to his wife, was particularly chilling. "The bridge speaks to us in the dark hours, my love. It promises us eternity if we serve it truly. Tomorrow night we make the offering. 17 volunteers, one for each year of construction planned. If you don't hear from me again, know that I am not dead, but transformed, part of something greater than mortality." 17 workers, 17 years of planned construction. The bridge had actually taken 14 years to build, 3 years less than planned. 3 workers' bodies were supposedly recovered. 14 were never found. That evening, I went to Lieutenant Home in Queens. She lived alone in a modest house filled with books and case files. She poured us both coffee and sat across from me with an expression I'd never seen on her face. Fear mixed with resignation. "My father was a cop," she began. "He worked the Brooklyn Bridge beat in the 1970s. When I was young, he told me stories. Things he couldn't put in reports. Things his superiors ordered him to forget." "What kind of things?" "People who aged backwards while on the bridge. Suicides whose bodies were never found, even though witnesses saw them hit the water. Maintenance workers who reported entire sections of the bridge that didn't exist on any blueprint. Rooms, passages. Even what one worker swore was a library filled with books written in no language he recognized." She pulled out an old photo album, showing me pictures of her father in uniform. In one, he was standing on the Brooklyn Bridge with another officer. That's his partner, James Morrison. One night in 1978, Morrison went to check a disturbance on the bridge. He was gone for 3 hours. When he came back, he'd aged 20 years. His hair was white, his face lined, but his ID, his fingerprints, everything confirmed he was still 32-year-old James Morrison. He retired the next day, never spoke about what happened. Where is he now? He died in 1985. But here's the strange thing. At his funeral, my father swore he saw Morrison on the Brooklyn Bridge, looking exactly as he had before that night in 1978. You think he's still there? I think the bridge takes people, Cross. Takes them and keeps them, uses them for something. My father spent his last years researching it, trying to understand. He left me all his notes. She handed me a thick folder. Inside were dozens of reports, newspaper clippings, photographs, all documenting strange occurrences on the Brooklyn Bridge dating back to its opening. But what caught my attention was a list of names, with dates beside them. My name was at the bottom, with October 31st, 2024 written next to it. Your father wrote my name. That's impossible. He died before I even joined the force. Look at the handwriting for your entry. It's different. Someone added it later. I examined it closely. The handwriting was familiar, it was mine, but I had no memory of writing it. Cross, I think you should leave the city. Take your family and go, at least until after October 31st. I can't. People are being drawn to the bridge if I'm not there. If you're not there, maybe fewer people will be drawn. Have you considered that you might be the catalyst? That the bridge is using you to gather others? I hadn't considered that, and the thought chilled me. When I got home, Teresa was waiting with our bags packed. We're leaving, she said. My sister in Boston. We can stay with her until this passes. Teresa, the marks on your hands are spreading. I can see them on your arms now. Whatever is happening to you, we need to get you away from that bridge. She was right. The patterns had spread up my forearms, faint but visible. But as we drove toward the city limits, something strange happened. The closer we got to leaving New York, the more pain I felt. It started as discomfort, then became actively painful, like my bones were being pulled apart. Ray, what's wrong? I can't leave, it won't let me. We turned back, and immediately the pain subsided. The bridge had claimed me already. I couldn't leave its range. That night, October 8th, going into the 9th, I gave up fighting and went to the bridge. Morgan was waiting at the center, along with about 30 other people. They all had the same marks on their skin, in various stages of development. The gathering has begun, Morgan said. October 31st approaches, and the bridge must renew itself. Renew itself? How? Every structure needs maintenance, Officer Cross, but the Brooklyn Bridge maintains itself through us. Every person who bears the marks becomes part of its support system, lending their life force to keep it strong. You're talking about human sacrifice. No, I'm talking about symbiosis. The bridge gives as much as it takes. Those who join with it fully gain immortality of a sort. Their consciousness becomes part of the bridge's greater awareness. They experience every crossing, every sunrise, every moment of the bridge's existence. One of the gathered people stepped forward. A young woman named Diana, whom I'd met earlier. Officer, I was dying. Terminal brain cancer. 3 weeks to live, the doctors said. But since the marks appeared, the tumors have been shrinking. The bridge is healing me, transforming me into something that can't die from disease. Others shared similar stories. Chronic pain disappearing, mental illness clearing, injuries healing at impossible rates. The bridge wasn't just taking, it was giving, transforming, improving those it marked. But Webb died, I pointed out. Webb tried to resist the transformation, Morgan explained. He wanted to understand it intellectually while fighting it physically. The process requires surrender, acceptance. Those who fight it are destroyed by it. And on October 31st, the ritual completes. Those who are ready join fully with the bridge. Those who aren't, they're released, the marks fade, and they go on with their lives never quite remembering what happened. How many join fully? Usually one or two. This year seems different. The bridge is calling more strongly. Perhaps because the city above has grown so much, the bridge needs more support to maintain the connection between Brooklyn and Manhattan. Or perhaps because something else is coming, something that will require the bridge to be stronger. I wanted to leave, to run, but I also wanted to stay. The bridge's pull was like gravity, natural, inevitable, almost comforting. Over the next week, I continued going to work, but my focus was entirely on the bridge. I researched every death, every disappearance, every strange occurrence. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. The bridge had been taking people since it opened, incorporating them into itself. Hammond was released from the hospital on October 15th. He came to see me immediately. Cross, we need to stop this. Whatever's happening, it's not natural. Define natural. The bridge has been doing this for 141 years. At what point does something become part of the natural order? He stared at me, shocked. That's not you talking. That's the bridge, was it? I couldn't tell anymore. My thoughts felt like my own, but they were aligned with the bridge's purpose now. I understood what it needed, what it wanted. Hammond, you felt it too, the pull. You could join us. Us? He backed away. Ray, listen to yourself. You're talking like you're in a cult. Not a cult, a symbiosis. The bridge needs us, and we need the bridge. It's the heart of New York, the connection that makes this city possible. Without it, Manhattan and Brooklyn would be separate worlds. There are other bridges, none like this one. This was the first, the most important. It established the pattern that all other connections follow. Hammond left, but I knew he'd be back. The bridge had marked him too. I could see the faint pattern starting on his hands. On October 20th, the gathering had grown to nearly 100 people. We met on the bridge every night, sharing experiences, feeling the bridge's presence grow stronger. Some people left, unable to accept what was happening, but most stayed, drawn by the promise of transformation. Teresa had stopped trying to convince me to leave. She just watched me with sad eyes as the pattern spread across my entire body. They were beautiful in their way. Geometric perfection, the mathematical precision of engineering made flesh. October 25th brought another death. A city councilman who had been pushing for the bridge's renovation was found on the walkway, his body bearing the marks, but twisted, broken. He had fought the transformation and lost. The media was starting to notice. Stories about a Brooklyn Bridge cult appeared in tabloids. The mayor's office released statements about increased security on the bridge, but no amount of security could stop what was happening. The bridge itself was the force drawing people in. Lieutenant called me in on October 28th. Cross, I'm placing you on administrative leave. You're not well. I'm better than I've ever been. You have patterns all over your visible skin. You talk about the bridge like it's alive. You've been seen leading gatherings of similarly affected people. This has to stop. After October 31st, it will stop, one way or another. What happens on October 31st? The bridge renews itself. Has been doing it every year since 1883. Most years it's subtle. One or two people disappear, join with the bridge. This year's different. This year it needs more. Why? I don't know yet. But I'll find out in 3 days. She wanted to arrest me, I could see it in her eyes, but for what? Being marked by something impossible? Leading gatherings on public property? There was no crime that fit what was happening. October 30th was when everything became clear. Morgan took me into the bridge. Not just the room we'd found, but deeper, into spaces that shouldn't exist. We walked through walls that became permeable at Morgan's touch, descended stairs that led to chambers that couldn't physically fit within the bridge's structure. In the deepest chamber, I saw it, the heart of the bridge. It wasn't mechanical or electrical. It was organic, but not in any biological sense I understood. It was made of crystallized consciousness, the merged awareness of everyone who had ever joined with the bridge. Thousands of minds, all working in harmony to maintain not just the physical structure, but the metaphysical connection between Brooklyn and Manhattan. The bridge is more than steel and stone, Morgan explained. It's a ritual made permanent, a spell cast in iron and cable. It binds the city together not just physically but spiritually. Without it, New York would fragment, become just another collection of islands and boroughs instead of a unified city. And it needs us to maintain this? It needs us to be this. We don't maintain the bridge, we become the bridge. Our consciousness merges with its structure. Our life force powers its purpose. What about our bodies? Some dissolve, their matter incorporated into the bridge itself. Others remain, transformed, able to move between the physical and structural realms, like me. And those who resist are expelled or destroyed. The bridge can't incorporate unwilling consciousness. It would poison the whole system. I understood then. The choice wasn't whether to join or not. The marks meant I was already part of it. The choice was whether to surrender to the transformation or fight it and be destroyed. How many this year? I asked. The bridge is calling for 17, the same number as the original sacrifice. Something is coming, Officer Cross. Something that will test the city's bonds. The bridge needs to be strong enough to hold New York together when it arrives. What's coming? I don't know. The bridge doesn't see the future clearly, only senses the pressures building. Economic collapse, social upheaval, natural disaster, something that will try to tear the city apart. The bridge must be ready. October 31st arrived gray and windy. I said goodbye to Teresa, though I couldn't explain what kind of goodbye it was. She held me tight and whispered, "Come back if you can." I arrived at the bridge at sunset to find hundreds of people gathered. Not just those with marks, but others drawn by curiosity or concern. The media was there. Police were trying to control crowds. It was chaos. But at exactly 11:47 p.m., the moment the bridge's construction had been completed 141 years ago, everything stopped. At 11:47 p.m. on October 31st, time seemed to crystallize. Every person on the bridge, marked and unmarked, believer and skeptic, froze in place. Only those of us with the patterns could still move, and we found ourselves drawn to 17 specific points along the bridge's span. I stood at position 7, halfway between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Around me, I could feel the bridge's consciousness pressing against my mind, not invasive, but inviting, like a door held open. Morgan appeared in the center of the bridge, but now I could see their true form. Not a single person, but a composite of dozens, all the keepers who had served over the decades. Their voice was a harmony when they spoke. The moment of choosing has come. Those who wish to remain human, step away from your positions. Those who wish to transcend, remain. 3 people immediately stepped away. The marks on their skin began to fade, and they collapsed, caught by police and EMTs, who suddenly unfroze. They would wake with no memory of the past month. The bridge's mercy for those who chose not to join. 14 remained, including myself. Hammond was at position 13. He looked at me across the distance, fear and determination warring in his eyes. "Cross," he called out, "we can still walk away." "Can we?" knowing what we know, feeling what we feel. The bridge isn't just offering immortality, Hammond, it's offering purpose. To be part of something that connects, that unifies, that endures. But at what cost? Everything worthwhile has a cost. The bridge pulsed, and I felt its full history flow through me. Every person who had crossed it, every moment of joy and sorrow it had witnessed, every sunrise and sunset for 141 years. I saw the city as the bridge saw it, not as buildings and streets, but as a living organism, with the bridge as its vital artery. But I also saw what was coming. Not clearly, but in impressions. Within the year, something would try to divide New York, to break it apart. Political, economic, social, the forces were already building. The bridge showed me protests turning to riots, communities turning against each other, the city fragmenting. Without a strong enough binding force, New York would tear itself apart. "This is why," I said, understanding finally. The bridge doesn't just connect Brooklyn and Manhattan physically. It connects them metaphysically. It's the symbol that holds the city's identity together. And symbols need power to work. Morgan nodded. Every great city has such bindings, though most have forgotten them. Paris has its catacombs, London its Thames, Rome its ancient roads. These aren't just infrastructure. They're the soul of the city made manifest. Diana, the woman with cancer, spoke from position 3. I choose to join, not just for healing, but for meaning, to be part of something eternal. One by one, the others declared their choices. 9 chose to join. 5 more stepped away, unable to make the final commitment. That left Hammond and me among the 9. "Ray," Hammond said, "what about our families? Our lives? They'll continue. We'll still exist, just differently. Morgan still walks the bridge, still interacts with people. We won't be gone, just changed." The bridge pulsed again, stronger this time. I felt my consciousness beginning to separate from my body, not dying, but expanding. I could feel every cable, every stone, every rivet of the bridge. I could feel the cars crossing, the pedestrians walking, the wind through the cables creating harmonics that were actually words in a language older than human speech. But then I heard something else. Teresa's voice, carried on the wind. She was on the shore watching, calling my name. And in that moment I hesitated. The bridge felt my hesitation and showed me 2 futures. In one, I joined fully with it, became part of its eternal consciousness, helped hold the city together through the coming crisis. But Teresa lived her life alone, always wondering what had happened to me, never getting closure. In the other future, I stepped away. The marks would fade, my memory of this month would blur, and I would return to my normal life. But without enough consciousness to strengthen it, the bridge would be weaker when the crisis came. Not weak enough to fall, but weak enough that some connections would break. Some bonds between communities would shatter. The city would survive but scarred, divided in ways that might never fully heal. "Choose, Officer Cross," Morgan said, and for the first time, I heard urgency in their voice. "The moment is passing." I thought about my oath as a police officer, to protect and serve. Was joining with the bridge the ultimate expression of that oath, protecting the entire city's spiritual infrastructure? Or was it abandoning my duty to the physical world? Hammond made his choice first. He stepped away, gasping as the marks left his body. "I can't," he said. "I have kids. They need their father." That left 8 of us. The bridge pulsed one final time, and I felt it fully. Not just its consciousness, but its need, its purpose, its love for the city it connected. The Brooklyn Bridge wasn't just infrastructure, it was a guardian, a protector, a binding force that had held New York together through wars, disasters, economic collapses, and it was asking me to help it continue that work. I made my choice, but it wasn't the choice anyone expected. I stepped forward, not away, but I didn't surrender to the transformation. Instead, I offered the bridge a bargain. "I'll serve," I said, "but not by joining completely. Let me remain human, remain a cop, but connected to you. Let me be your agent in the physical world, investigating threats, protecting those who might harm themselves on the bridge, preparing the city for what's coming. In exchange, I'll feed you energy, consciousness, purpose, but while staying myself." The bridge considered this. Through its consciousness, I felt the debate among those who had joined it over the years. It had never been offered such a bargain before. Keepers like Morgan had always fully transformed. Finally, Morgan spoke. "The bridge accepts, but with conditions. You will bear the marks always. You will feel its needs, its pains, its joys. You will never be able to leave New York. And when your physical body finally fails, you will join fully, no choice remaining." I accept. The transformation that followed was unlike what the others experienced. Instead of my consciousness merging with the bridge, a connection formed, like a telephone line between two separate entities. I could feel the bridge, communicate with it, draw on its knowledge and power, but I remained myself. The marks on my skin changed, becoming less visible but deeper, part of my cellular structure. To casual observation, I looked normal, but anyone who looked closely would see the pattern in my eyes, the slight geometric precision in my movements. The other 7 completed their transformations. Their bodies dissolved into light that merged with the bridge's structure. But I could still feel them, their consciousness now part of the bridge's greater awareness. They were at peace, fulfilled in a way living humans rarely achieve. As midnight passed into November the 1st, the freeze broke. The crowds gasped as 7 people simply vanished from the bridge. The media went crazy, theories flew, but without bodies, without evidence, there was nothing to investigate officially. Hammond recovered quickly, his memory of the event fuzzy. "Cross, what happened?" I remember being on the bridge, feeling sick, then waking up with EMTS around me. "Mass hallucination," I said, the lie coming easily. Something about the wind patterns and the bridge's acoustics. It affected everyone differently. He accepted it because the alternative was impossible.